HeyWoah here with the second edition of Choose Your Army video for the second edition of Age of Sigmar. And this will probably end up being a series of continuously updated videos. Simply because this is the year Games Workshop has told us that they will finally churn out those battle tomes and make sure that all the armies that have support are properly updated for the second edition of their game. As such, we're getting about a new army reveal every month, sometime sooner. And I was going to kind of wait for the dust to settle, but I think just getting out ahead of it is better than telling people to wait. I could just do an army a week, and it would probably be a year's worth of content, but I felt it was very important to put it all in one easy-to-watch video, which turns out to just be a terrific amount of work. And so special thanks to my Patreon supporters. I started a Patreon to help me get these videos out faster, and so I really appreciate their support. You can check me out at patreon.com/HeyWoah. Secondly, a special thanks to Vince Venturella and Warhammer Weekly for not only providing great hobby videos, but also insight on ease of army acquisition and expense, as well as hobby difficulty. Thirdly, a special thanks to Rob Symes from The Honest Wargamer for terminology, definitions, and especially LLV for his statistics and their use on my tiers, which are constantly changing, but ever updated. Second edition changelog, May 2019. Added helpful slides for the whole intro section to better show on screen what is being talked about for easy click-through scrubbing. Changed and updated intro section. Every army rundown updated with pricing and acquisition information, expanded hobby information, better playstyle and standout unit information, and updated tiers. Enough has changed that the whole vid is probably worth a watch all the way through, even if you've seen the first one. The most common question I see about Age of Sigmar is, what army should I play? I'm sympathetic to the struggle. The cost of entry is high, and you don't want to make the wrong choice. The way they intend for you to start an army, and one I typically tend to suggest, you pick up a box of units per month, assemble them, paint them, have your little 2-hour after work de-stressing hobby experience, and spread the cost out over the course of maybe 6 months, and then you have yourself a tabletop ready army. If you want to buy it all at once, that's fine, but that's where it gets to be pretty expensive. You want an army whose playstyle fits your personality, what you like to do as a gamer, something you think works in a fun and interesting way. Also, you don't want to buy into an expensive and time-consuming hobby only to later find out that you can't win a game to save your life. In second edition, the balance between armies is much better, and so the danger has been diminished of picking up an army with your favorite models and then just getting crushed every time. Now, some people care more about winning than others, but that's not really what I'm talking about here. The gulf is wide between the best armies and the worst armies. So wide, in fact, that even somebody who basically doesn't really care about winning, well, it's not about winning, it's about being able to play the game. And that's the kind of stuff that I want to try to avoid with this information for the video. If you don't care really about playing the game very much, you just want to learn to paint, and you don't care about winning at all, or even like getting a good game in, however you define that, well then you really can just browse their website and find the models you like the most and just play them. On the other end of the spectrum, if you really actually only do care about winning, well then just skip to the tier section and choose one of the S tiers. However, there's a caveat here. Things change. Things change about every 6 months, points fluctuate, rules changes, new things come out, FAQs get updated. If you're going to ride the wave of chasing the meta, understand that it's a treadmill, and you're going to do a lot of selling out and buying in, possibly more than once a year. So, just understand that. That's not to say that it's a bad thing. I was very competitive in Magic the Gathering, and I found it extremely fun. I consider Age of Sigmar to be quite different, but you might not, and that's fine. Get your trophies, man. Like, if what you find fun is writing a better list, having a better plan, and outplaying your opponents and getting that trophy, cool. No problem here. I find that most players fall somewhere in the middle. They want to shy away from the overpowered factions, knowing that things like that often give their opponents a bad time. But on the other hand, don't want to fall in love with a mountain of garbage. Losing even casual games week in and week out will sour anyone on a faction as the months add up. Secondly, the fact that I must tailor this video to a wide range of interests should be evidence that not everyone's idea of fun is the same. And communicating with your opponent about what kind of match you'd like is even more crucial in Age of Sigmar than other games. There's no formats like in Magic that keep Legacy Storm Combo from playing against 40-card draft deck. AoS is a social game and a social hobby. There's no hidden information like in Magic. Everything's on the table, so to speak. And building a community of cool people is just as important as improving as a painter or a pilot. Watch games in person and spend some time at your local stores. Seeing the game live is an important step as you approach the hobby and should not be skipped. I found AoS players to be more than happy to help new people. Basic Age of Sigmar terminology. There are 4 grand alliances separated by gods and to a lesser extent philosophies. They are order, chaos, death, and destruction. Armies are split up into unit types, and I won't touch on them all, but the most important ones are heroes and battle line. In the average game size, which is 2k, you can have up to 6 heroes and must run at least 3 battle line with no upper limit. A war scroll is an individual unit's stats and rules. Your 2 options for army type are Grand Alliance or Faction. Grand Alliance, or GA for short, can select, well, anything from the GA, and so has the deepest pool of diverse units, but pays for that range with weak allegiance abilities and generic battle line. Grand Alliance armies are not recommended for new players, because you really have to know a lot about everything to build them. You have to know about the metagame, you have to know what even is good, you have to know pretty much every unit in an entire Grand Alliance to be able to choose what your jobs are, you have to know what jobs you even want in the army. It's a fairly advanced thing to build a decent Grand Alliance force. I consider Grand Alliance armies to fall into 2 places, and one is metagame chasers who think they have predicted a metagame perfectly and then choose a selection, like with a scalpel, of simply the perfect amount of things to deal with some other amount of things, all of which you're going to have to know about, and so not for new players. And secondly, people with way old armies that aren't supported anymore from a long time ago and just start cobbling stuff together so that they can kind of play the game. And, 9 times out of 10 you're going to get smashed all the time, and those units aren't supported, their rules are old and bad. There's a reason why you can find like 7,000 points of High Elves for real cheap on eBay. Stick to 2nd edition battle tomes. A faction is a specific army. Bone Splitters is a faction, Flesh Eater Courts is a faction. They all have that keyword on their war scrolls, and if your whole army shares the same keyword, then you get to use their allegiance abilities, which are often much more synergistic and powerful than GA. They often get to use better or cheaper units as battle line as well. This is called battle line if. Allegiance abilities are 4 things: battle line if, artifacts, command traits, and battle traits. Artifacts can be given to heroes, you get 1 to start plus 1 per battalion. A command trait is a bonus power given to your general. And battle traits are special abilities your whole army enjoys. Battalions cost points and are groups of units that enjoy some extra powers. I see this question a lot. Yes, you have to pay for the battalion as well as pay for all the units within. But when you take a battalion, this can lower your number of drops, which we'll talk about next, which is important. You get a command point, which is important, and you get an extra artifact to give to your guys, which is also good. And so taking battalions, if they're good, is usually a pretty strong thing to do. It's not something you necessarily have to do, but if your army has great battalions, why fight it? Allies give you some wiggle room when playing a faction, but who you can ally with and how many you can take are limited, and they never benefit from allegiance abilities. I'm going to come out ahead of a very common question here. No, you can't give artifacts to allies, not even realm artifacts. I know War Scroll Builder lets you choose spell lores for your wizards that you ally in, but that's a bug. You can't. Allies are, for all intents and purposes, just the model and its War Scroll. Endless spells, however, are not allegiance abilities. Although sometimes they have restrictions on who specifically can cast them, this has nothing to do with allies. So yes, you can have a Knight Incantor and his Comet in your Fireslayer's army. Realm spell lores have to do with where you're playing. I mentioned realm spell lores a lot in the video. They are special spells your wizards know when you are playing in a specific realm, and although these are optional, more and more people tend to be adopting them. Noteworthy abilities are Rend, Mortal Wounds, Unbinding, and Flying. Attacks with Rend add a penalty to armor saving throws. Mortal Wounds ignore armor altogether. Unbinding is counterspelling, it has a 30-inch range. And Flying lets you freely pass over terrain and models as you move, although you always land when you reach the end of a move. And yes, piling in and charging are both considered moves, so you're always flying then too. This makes units with flying extremely good, and a very tactical choice. Regarding attacks, hitting on 3s is considered good, and hitting on 4s is considered bad. Regarding defense, a 4-up save is considered okay, a 3-up save is considered very good, and a 5-up save is considered weak. It should be noted that a great way to overcome inaccurate attacks is by rolling 100 of them. A large number of bad attacks is almost always superior to a small number of good attacks. It's very nearly a rule of thumb in Age of Sigmar that if something has one single attack that seems amazing, it's a trick, and it's not. Don't be fooled, do the math. Objectives and battle plan. A battle plan is the scenario you play in a game, and features deployment, where objectives are, and the conditions for victory. Capturing is almost always whoever has the most models within 6 inches of an objective, although some battle plans vary. This is one of the reasons why being elite is not good in AoS. There are 18 commonly used battle plans in matched play. You don't win immediately if you table the opponent. You win if by turn 5 you have met the victory conditions. And so in contrast to 40k, the default list building option is not just spam the cheesiest longest range damage you can. It's more nuanced, more about movement and scoring points, and more about balanced lists that do well in the majority of potential battle plans you'll play in. Victory through sacrifice is a cornerstone of not only the lore of Age of Sigmar, but also the game itself. It's a deadly game, and it's an epic game where the tides of battle can turn against you instantly, or the coffin door can shut on an already weakened opponent out of nowhere. This is called priority. There are 5 battle rounds in Age of Sigmar. Consider them 5 chapters in a book. This isn't just you go, I go for the whole thing. After a battle round is over, when one person went and then the other person went, you roll for priority to see if the winds of fate change, and the tides of battle can go against you or blow at your back. Yes, sometimes this means people take 2 turns in a row, which can cause a previously even game to completely end, or to give the person on their heels against the ropes a fighting chance when they didn't have one otherwise. This is mythic fantasy, it's battlecruiser magic. Slang terminology. Drops. When deploying, players take turns placing units on the table, and whoever is done first chooses who takes the first turn, and so being low drops is overpowered. Because getting to decide who takes the first turn after everything has been deployed is extremely powerful. And furthermore, after the first battle round, if you make your opponent go first, you have the first chance of a double turn. Ah, tactics. So even though the concept of taking 2 turns in a row is unbelievably overpowered and unbalancing, there are tactics that arise to get around them or play to their strengths. You should consider trying to do this. Traps. When building an army list, a trap is a unit that seems good but isn't. Horde versus Elite. Horde is a bunch of guys, typically 30 or more, and Elite is a few guys, often with powerful war scrolls to make up for it. Although the term Elite has colloquially positive connotations, it is a net downside in Age of Sigmar. Hammers and Anvils. These sound like what they are. A hammer smashes, an anvil doesn't get smashed. A bully is a big distracting unit that the opponent has to deal with, but you don't mind if it dies, and if they don't, they get to bully the opponent with it. Screen, chaff, and bubble wrap. These are commonly large numbers of inexpensive models, whose purpose is to die for the greater good, to protect you from your opponents attacking your weaker or more important models behind them. Remember that it's a fantasy game, although a mythic fantasy game, and so there isn't a terribly large amount of shooting unlike 40k. And so screens and bubble wraps can be a very strong tool. MSU stands for multiple small units, although the definition is shifting to be a shorthand for just a minimum sized unit. A tar pit is basically an anvil that has some means of holding the opponent there and wasting their time. Assassins and snipers. Assassins are meant to kill heroes, they're generally melee, and a sniper is meant to kill heroes, generally ranged. Assassins that can't fly or teleport are almost always traps. A glass cannon is a hammer that has virtually no defenses at all. A grabber is a high movement unit that can fly across the board and assault a point to take it, and a camper is an anvil that's meant to sit on a point the whole game scoring points. This type of unit is also known as the home base. Strategies. Alpha Strike is red burn. You run across the board as fast as you can, strike the opponent real hard, and hopefully cripple them so that the game is yours. A Beta Strike is a tactic that you accept someone's Alpha Strike, don't die, they bounce off, and then you countercharge to kill them. A Grinder is somewhere between a hammer and an anvil. Generally a big strong unit that can take it as well as it gives it, and tends to get into longer combats but comes out ahead. A Death Star formation is one or more AoE buff heroes surrounded by big units that need them. This is generally a downside in AoS because projecting power to multiple places at once is often the difference between a win and killing lots of guys but then losing on points. Movement shenanigans come in 4 types: flying, deep striking, ambushing, and teleporting. Flying is considered a movement shenanigan because it's so powerful on the table. It's hard to fully understand how amazing flying is until you play without it and then play with it. Deep striking has to do with setup. You can be set up in the Celestial Realm for Stormcast, you can be set up in the Underworld for Night Haunt, but it has to do with deployment. This is where you initially deploy the unit pretty much off the table, and then the first time, generally your first movement phase, you put them on the table, they can come down anywhere outside of 9 from enemy units. An ambush is also a deployment tool where you set them off the table again. In the Aether Sea for Idoneth Deepkin, or I think it's just called In Ambush for Beast of Chaos, but they're prowling around the edges of the battlefield and they come in the first time you have a movement phase. It's the same thing as a deep strike, have to be outside of 9, but you have to be wholly within some board edge because you're coming outside from there. Then you have teleports, which are also outside of 9, but they happen during play. And so you have some spell where you target a unit and that unit can teleport, like Skitter Leap or the Stormcast Prayer. As far as deep strikes, ambushes, and teleports, these things generally all happen at the end of the movement phase and your dudes can't move afterwards, although there are some exceptions. Small section to get out ahead of some common questions. Unless otherwise stated, you can teleport out of combat without penalty, and a teleport is not a move, it is a setup, and that's how the game sees it. Rules language is sometimes confusingly written as this counts as that unit's move, but, and the facts confirm this, they're trying to say instead of a move you can do this, and not that the teleport actually counts as a game action move. This becomes important in certain battle plans which require you to move onto an objective to capture it, and a teleport does not satisfy such requirements. Then we have a mechanic that doesn't have a name because they don't have a keyword for it, even though they should. It is, whenever you would be dealt a wound or mortal wound, for each point of damage you roll a die, and on a certain number or higher, it is prevented. These are known as shrugs, wards, or ward saves, even though technically they're not a save, or feel no pain if the person used to play 40k. By default, they work on wounds and mortal wounds, and unlike armor saves, you roll for each point of damage you're about to take, because it all happens after all of your armor saves have happened. Some of them only work on mortal wounds, some of them only work on normal wounds, it'll say in the rules. Most of these are 6-ups, some of them are 5-ups, some of them are even 4-ups, or better, but they're very rare and very powerful. Yes, they currently stack, so if you have 3 different reasons why you have different wards, you get all 3 rolls before you take the damage, which can lead to certain units becoming like statistically invincible. Here's hoping it gets changed. Ethereal means immune to rend, but also that your save can't be reduced or increased for any reason, and often omitted extra. No cover for you. Finecast is a mixture of plastic and resin. That was the evolutionary missing link between resin models and plastic models. It is very difficult to work with from a hobby perspective, especially for new players, and comes with flashing that you'll need to scrape off with a razor blade for about a half an hour. It's a little soft, and staves and swords and pieces of hair tend to sag in higher temperatures. It has a slightly porous surface that paint interacts differently to than normal plastic from the GW line. If the army you're thinking about has a whole bunch of Finecast or resin models, on their website they call it resin, but it's Finecast. That's something to consider when thinking about the hobby aspect of it. Number 1 is the sell. I talk about the fluff, the look, and the overview. This is propaganda. You can get more complete information from the core book as well as the individual Armies battle tome if it has one. Number 2 is playstyle, as well as some general tactics that the army tends to follow, as well as standout units. And does the fluff fit the playstyle? Number 3 is the hobby aspect. Number 4 is difficulty to acquire / price. Public service announcement. There are a lot of buy and sell Facebook groups which are a great resource for good deals, but always, and I mean always, use PayPal and use payment for goods and services and ship with tracking. Never use friends and family gift, no matter how nice they seem. There are a lot of scammers. Don't be taken advantage of. It's worth the extra $5. Number 5 is difficulty to pilot on a scale of 1 through 5. While it may be annoying to keep all your spells and references in order for the first 5 games or so, this difficulty rating assumes you've gotten used to playing the army. Having lots of options is not difficulty, it is in fact usually the opposite. They are generally a safety net to break your fall when you mess up, and the opportunity for multiple pathways to victory. Factored in are the consequences for your mistakes. Sometimes I mention floors and ceilings when this is really pertinent. The section is rounded out with list building difficulty, where options are difficult. 6 is competitiveness, where we talk tiers. And so I've given all the armies tiers, not so that you can avoid the worst armies and choose the best armies. I give you these tiers so that you can look at your local metagame, what your friends play, what your guys at your local store play, and determine, generally speaking, what kind of armies and what kind of strength of armies they're using. From there you're informed, and you can choose something of a similar power level so that you can have friendly contests and a sporting game. Like, that's fun. My tiers are simplified and rough, because the video is for new players just trying to basically not make a huge mistake with army choice. And so granular differences and particular matchups are sort of less important for this one. It's a quick take guideline. The stats I'm basing them off of are LLVs from the Honest Wargamer, as well as general tournament following and knowledge. The stats that I particularly pay attention to for this are the ratio of 5-0s and 4-1s versus 0-5s and 1-4s, your win percentage, number of players who are playing it versus how well they tend to be doing, and to a lesser extent, number of first, second, and third placements. I mostly care more about record than I do actual placement, simply due to how many AoS tournaments handle things. They put a lot of soft scores in there. We'll often have the undefeated person being second or third, and a 4-1 or 5-1 person being first because their army was painted nicer. And while those alternative means for getting points are important, and you can step up your game by caring about them, we're really looking just at gameplay here. So the real number of tiers is probably larger than this, but I'm truncating it for simplicity. There's tier 3, aka bad. This tier is filled with armies that, typically speaking, it doesn't matter how well you play, you can't beat people. And very often you can't even get a good game in. Like, you'll get smashed no matter what you do, and you didn't even really get to play with your toys, and who wants that? These armies tend to have a 40-ish% win rate, some of them even a 30-ish% win rate. Shoutouts to my poor brothers and sisters on Ever-Chosen Beastclaw Raiders and Slaves to Darkness. When going to an event with a tier 3 army, it is a huge success and a triumph to go 3-2. And really what that means is you got smashed by real armies the first few rounds, and then fought against other bottom tier armies in the lower brackets to finish off the day. Then there's tier 2, which is called viable. This is probably where most people want to be, 1 or 2. Viable means just that. If you have a tightly tuned list and you play very well, you can hang. And every once in a while, with an advantageous tournament pack, or with good matchups, or with good play, or with a little luck, you can get a trophy. But the real thing is, tier 2 armies tend to be able to just get a good game in, one way or another. You got decent tools to deal with reasonable situations, you have multiple pathways to victory, you have units that can specialize in one thing or another, and generally you're either well-rounded or can do one thing really well. You got some shenanigans as well. You got something cheap, something unfair, which is sort of the beauty of it. All the balanced factions are kind of unbalanced, right? Because they all do something cheap. It's like Soul Calibur 2. All the characters are real good because they're all cheap in different, interesting ways. You got something other people can complain about, and that's fun. Tier 1 is competitive. Tier 1 armies tend to be fairly well-rounded and have multiple pathways to victory. You have shenanigans just like Tier 2, but yours are just better. The difference is yours are either much more reliable or very difficult for most armies to actually deal with or play around. Their battle traits, combos, or synergies are very strong. And your weaknesses, unlike Tier 2, might not be as crippling, or you have built-in ways to circumvent them if you so choose. You're not without your bad matchups, and you're not without your bad battle plans, but for the most part you have much less of that than Tier 2. You won't always beat Tier 2, it really depends on individual matchups, but you're the kind of army, at least before Flesh Eater Courts and Scaventide came out, that people would expect and be very unsurprised to find in the top 3 of any given tournament. I suppose that's another way to look at tiers, is how surprising is it that your army ended up where it did in a given tournament? It's not surprising that Darkling Covens, Beastclaw Raiders, and Dispossessed are at the bottom of the list, next to the dropouts, and it's not surprising that Daughters of Cain got first place. However, then Flesh Eater and Scaventide came out, and things changed. Introducing S tier. Welcome back, old friend. Why, we haven't seen you since first edition, with Vanguard Wing and Change Host. Ah, the memories. Here's a helpful graphic so it's all in one place. Scaventide just have the best mix of everything. They don't give up anything for their strengths. They have the best shooting, some of the best hordes, all of its battle shock immune, great spellcasting, best endless spell in the game, severely undercosted heroes who can either skitter outside of combat when activated, or are statistically immune to damage due to stacking ward saves. More warp power might be the strongest offensive buff in the whole game, with rerolling all hits and wounds in melee or ranged. Teleporting, they got it all, man. Flesh Eater Courts are much easier to play, but they'll kill you. And it's hard to outplay them, because of the way their mechanics are written. See, they strike first, at the very beginning of combat, before anyone else gets to go. And so, if they charge you, they get to kill you before you even have a chance to go. But if you outmaneuver them and charge them, and outplay them, they get to fight first and they'll just kill you. Well, what if you outplay them even more and charge them with 2 different equally good units? Well, they can spend a command point and pile in twice. What if you actually end up killing Terrorgeist? Well, that's fine because when they die, they get to pile in an attack, so they'll still kill the thing. And so at the end of the day, you just traded 800 points of yours for 400 points of theirs, and their guy summoned 200 points on turn 1 already. Shooting them is just about the only option, but shooting tends to be pretty weak in AoS, with a few exceptions, and the general has Ethereal, so good luck. It's golden parachutes and safety nets, the army. They also have tons of summoning, so they're an elite army that gets around the elite problem by having flying and always fighting first, and summoning all their dudes to capture objectives from board edges for free. I added a new half tier here just to point out that Daughters of Cain is head and shoulders above everybody else, but not, strictly speaking, broken. Although they are long overdue for a nerf. Hag Queen probably costs half of what she should, and Hagnar's durability is overpowered. In Tier 1, Idoneth Deepkin that isn't using a whole bunch of eels is probably low Tier 2, but everyone has pretty much settled on about 18 eels and 2 Soul Scryers, so here they are in Tier 1. Best Alpha Strike army in the game. Legions of Nagash got knocked down a little peg here. They used to be just about neck and neck with Daughters of Cain, although not as good. But the metagame shifted a little bit, so here they are in normal Tier 1. Slaanesh is real new, but they were low-key very good before, and they got better, so I think Tier 1 is a fine place to put them for now. Stormcast Eternals rounding out Tier 1, definitely the worst of Tier 1, but their shooting is really good, and their units are really good. It's probably auto-losing one popular battle plan that keeps them at the bottom of Tier 1, arguably halfway between Tier 1 and Tier 2. Fire Slayers has barely even come out, so I'm putting them at just about the tippy top of Tier 2. We'll see where they land, and I wouldn't at all be surprised if they were firmly in Tier 1, but it's been like a week, so here we are. Khorne sits right about where it used to. It's just much more fun to play now, but it's a very popular army, and so the spread is really wide between people who get crushed and people who win. And it's harder to play than you might think. Sylvaneth has an asterisk next to it because it was just announced that they're getting a new book as soon as some Brexit port fiasco gets fixed. But as they currently stand, I would arguably put them in maybe Tier 1, maybe Tier 2, it's hard to say. I would have put them in low Tier 1 before Flesh Eater and Scaventide came out, so I think it's reasonable to drop them down. Also, as we look at this tier list, I think it's interesting to point out that everyone in Tier 3 either doesn't have a book or doesn't have a new book. And everybody who's got a 2nd edition battle tome is in Tier 2 or above. What a huge success. And I think Games Workshop should be commended for its better balance in 2nd edition. Just waiting on those battle tomes, you know? Tier 4 is Abandon Hope Ye Who Enter Here tier. These are leftover collections of kits the GW still sells basically as pools of allies for the supported factions or to make soup armies out of when going straight Grand Alliance. Some of them only have one model in the entire faction. Some of them have many, but in general they aren't recommended at all. I included some of these in the main video proper because 3 people in the world were playing some of them, such as Phoenix Temple and Order Draconis, but I regret it. You know, I have to keep in mind that this is a resource for new players, and not an exercise in temporary tournament reporting. Also, GW did some house cleaning both on their website and on the Army Builder, so I'm cutting the factions that basically don't appear on those any longer, like Firebellies and Ironweld Arsenal. It's just not worth talking about them, because they functionally hardly exist. And I don't want to really use my video to add legitimacy to something that GW is probably never going to support and isn't very good anyway. Anyway, the new and updated list of Tier 4 armies to avoid are as follows. Devoted of Sigmar, Eldritch Council, Order Draconis, Order Serpentis, Darkling Covens, Shadowblades, Greenskins, Scourge Privateers, sorry Luke Stone, Phoenix Temple, sorry Christian Weir, and Swifthawk Agents, sorry Tom Lyons. Some of these can be competitive with precision min-maxing, but they exist much more as an experienced tournament grinder's thought experiment that he actually painted, and much less so a new player's army to dive into and then realize there's 0 lore, ancient models, and no support. Someday they might get souped into proper Firestorm or Defenders of the Realms books or some such, but when they do get a book, you can make an informed decision and I'll add them to the video. Until then, stay away. And yes, I know many of these armies are better than Beastclaw Raiders, but you can stop DMing me. Bretonnians and Tomb Kings have been truly squatted, however, so there's no hope for them at all. If there's ever a reimagining of Knights and Ladies the Army, or Not Egypt, Please Don't Sue Us, Undead, it'll feature 100% new sculpts, models, lore, and releases. Sorry to the 11 people in the world who own and campaign for their return, and the hundreds of meme lords pretending to want their stuff. Tower Shield Paladins, Sarcosanct Full Plate Male Wizards, Archers that shoot lightning, Cavalry and heroes on weird monstrous mounts like Chocobos, Bearhounds, Dragon Horses, Griffin Rams, and Star Drakes. The first Storm Host was filled with souls of the greatest revolutionaries to better take back the realms from chaos. So we have Zeus throwing a thunderbolt from the clouds that crashes down onto a battlefield. Outrides an army of full-plate paladin versions of William Wallace, Toussaint Louverture, Spartacus, Robespierre, and George Washington all teamed up to overthrow the demonic ruling class oppressors. AoS is sweet. Always outnumbered, never outgunned. On the table you can set up half of your units in the Celestial Realm to deep strike down where they are needed, but they are a tad slow once there, so some good decisions need to be made over this. They also have a bit of a problem with enemy chaff, luckily. Both of those problems can be solved by putting 4 Cellstar Ballista with Lord Ordinator in the sky and then airdropping in Ren 2 artillery with exploding hits. This leaves them open to beta strikes, well it's true, so get good at winning priority for a double helping of Withering Fire. A Lord Castellant and Sequitors are all but required and make up your bread and butter anvil grinder with surprising punch, far outclassing Liberators in all ways for only 20 extra points, and arguably even superior to Paladins on foot for their points, although much less killy. These dudes really stand up to the lore of heroic supermen even as battle line. Evocators on Dracolines are a common though expensive choice for a hammer grabber, as is either a Relictor with Teleport Prayer or a Knight Vexillor with Teleport Banner for another way to remain mobile without having to rely on move 5. Judicators are an okay alternative battle line if not doing the whole Sarcosanct Chamber thing. Traps include every non-evocator type of Paladin, Vanguard Long Strikes, like 20 of your 28 heroes, especially the Knight Venator, as many are tempted by his good-seeming bow, and all non-incanter wizards, besides the 1 Arcanum General required to unlock Sequitur Battle Line. The one thing you don't have is good battalions, but strong Storm Hosts or Staunch Defender do much to make up for it. Hobby. New painters will find the open areas and textured seams of the armor and face masks a welcome introduction to painting with metallic paint and washes. And experienced painters will find a nice challenge to try non-metallic metals and clean faces. Acquisition, $1. Tons of Battle Force boxes, start collecting, box sets, you got Soul Wars, Tempest of Souls. Everyone and their mother is selling them online, plus they're elite. Probably the easiest army to collect next to Nighthaunt in Age of Sigmar. Note that some of the unit sizes you get in some of the special story boxes are bizarre, but even then the bit sites and eBay are replete with single figs or extra special weapons to round out a squad. Everybody's got extra Stormcast. Difficulty 2 stars. Half army deep strike, high defense, and Ren 2 range shooting do a lot to simplify your gameplay choices. That being said, dealing with getting outmaneuvered and making sure you capture objectives with numbers are your main goals here. List building difficulty 4 stars. Ah, the hard part. When you have like 100 unit choices, it's hard to narrow it down to just the best. Counterpoint. Everybody already knows what the best is. And so something like 1400 points of your list is pretty much already locked in, and it's just about that last bit, which involves predicting what you're going to play against, so still hard. Competitiveness low tier 1, arguably high tier 2. If you can't deal with a potential double turn worth of pinpoint Ren 2 Ballistae fire or 40 wounds worth of 3 upper rolling armor save sequiturs that still dish out 16 to 32 damage a turn, even in defensive mode, then you need to go back to the drawing board because that's what Stormcast is going to do. They're a gatekeeper. Pros. Good offense, good defense, good utility, lots of Ren and mortal wounds, deep striking, great buffs and synergies, strong ranged options. Cons. Elite, slow, mortal wounds counter your great armor, and you have trouble with chaff screens. On top of getting outmaneuvered by faster opponents, your slowness and low model count makes some battle plans extra hard for you. And total commitment, which disallows deep strikes, is nearly an auto loss. Also, everyone is 100% prepared for you, or should be. Continuing on in alphabetical order, Idoneth Deepkin. Idoneth Deepkin are soul-stealing dark elf pirate mind mages that have Men in Black Neuralizer aura on at all times. AoS is sweet. They bring a shadowy Aether Sea with them to battle so that they can ride their flying sea mounts while killing you. They are elven souls devoured by Slaanesh during the end times and ripped back out by Teclis in the Age of Myth. Being insular is wrapped up as an ideal in the concept of what they even are physically. They are cut off from sight after a short distance. They're cut off from the memories of those they interact with, and even cut off from the gods and the Well of Souls itself. Most children born have withered and weak souls because of this. No gods, not even Teclis, can answer their prayers. There's only one cure for this curse that they have discovered, and so the soul-stealing piracy begins. But they'll fight chaos, so proof that Grand Alliance order does not mean Grand Alliance good guys. Do you like marine biology? Do you like an elven hero riding the great wave of Kanagawa that wants to eat your soul? If you like pushing creative design just a little too far, then this army is for you. They have some of the best models in the game, although the eels look whack. On the table, you get to place 2 massive shipwrecks in your opponent's deployment zone to crowd them out from where they want to be. Then ambush in flying cavalry from board edges to pincer attack weak flanks. From there, the tides escalate up to the big combo turn on turn 3, where you fight first with your whole army and stack up Wind Fury extra attacks on chosen units near your Achelian general, or Volturnos. Has your opponent managed to kill him before turn 3? Did they position in such a way so that you can't get good combats in? Did they table you before high tide? Have they scored enough points so that it doesn't matter? This is the dance you play with your low model count glass cannon army with a telegraphed big combo turn. Standout units are eels. Morsar Guard do incredible damage on the charge and have a once per game electroshock at the beginning of combat for front loaded mortal wounds, and Ishalan Guard are durable rend immune screens. Both have flying and absurd movement. At the risk of making a sweeping statement, if you aren't playing eels, you're doing it wrong. Soul Scryer lets you ambush 2 units per, with a charge bonus, and is largely responsible for how strong their Alpha Strike is. Marti Thralls are your foot troops, and while they can do some nice damage, their armor is made out of tissue paper, and they will explode if someone hits them first. Also, they're on 32mm bases with 1-inch reach, even though their weapons are long two-handers, which generally precludes them from being a great strategy in the form of big 30-man units with soul renders in, say, a Morphan Enclave. I tried it just doesn't work. Which is a shame, but base sizes are often the hidden stat that determines whether or not something is great. On 25s, they might have compared favorably as expensive witch elves in some ways, but on 32s, they're a footnote in history. C'est la vie. Melee Eidolon is expensive but super consistent, and a decent alternative option to Eels number 10 through 18 if you don't want to spam them, or if your points changes in the upcoming GHB. Just give him Idnax's scales, he's got a problem with mortal wounds. Sadly, the rest of the book is just a bunch of traps. The Big Turtle, Lotan, Soul Renders, Sharks, all super weak or overpriced, or both. The 440 point Caster Eidolon is also a trap. His spells are too short range, he does bad damage in both ranged and melee, he's weak to mortal wounds, and he'll die in one combat if anything half serious charges him. If he had the Scaventide keyword, he'd be 160 points cheaper, and he'd still be passed over for Deceiver or Warp Seer, but that book is... well, stay tuned for the cast section. Marti Core is a decent battalion choice for reducing drops, but every other battalion is real bad. Hobby. This is a hard army to start with for new painters. Lots of flesh, lots of faces, hero quality detail on every model, even your battle line thralls. Not to mention an ocean of colorful references for the mounts. What a joy for an experienced painter to dive into though, nice challenge. Acquisition $3. Even though you're elite, your unit boxes ain't cheap, and you still need 2 Gloomtide shipwrecks when you thought you were done. Your start collecting is excellent, however. Difficulty 3 stars. It would be lower, as the strat is simple and powerful, but as an elite glass cannon army, the price for mistakes or bad luck is high. If not spamming eels, then the difficulty increases to 4 stars. You're spinning plates at that point. List building difficulty 1 star. Avoid the traps, and the list basically builds itself. Competitiveness tier 1. Non-eel spam competitiveness probably low tier 2. Pros. Fast, flying, strong ambush with charge bonuses, excellent damage on the charge, putting 2 full shipwrecks in your opponent's deployment zone. High tide. Sacrificially resistant to shooting, good spells. Cons. Bad at casting those good spells. Super fragile. Elite. Poor damage when not charging. Telegraphed mechanics the opponent gets to play around. Marti Thralls are on 32 mil bases with 1 inch reach, so you can't get a lot into combat, unfortunately. And lots of Holy Within. Seraphon. Note, one of the factions most likely to be getting a 2nd edition update book, and soon. 30,000-year-old amphibious Slan liches sail through realm space in Mayan, Aztec, Incan-style spaceships. After surviving the destruction of the world that was, they used constellation magic to reassemble their race from blueprints in their memories. And Dracothion the Star Dragon breathed life into their spawning chambers, I think. See, a lot of Seraphon lore is mysterious. They are beings of pure law and balance, essentially the Order version of daemons. They bring to war tons of Aztec dinosaurs. Some dinosaurs are riding dinosaurs. Some dinosaurs riding dinosaurs have shields and headdresses made out of yet other dinosaurs. And some big dinosaurs have frickin' laser beams. Like we're done here. If you want dinosaurs with frickin' laser beams led by psychic frog starcasters, then this army is for you. And if that's not what you want, then you had like a bad childhood or something. On the table, your Slan Starmaster uses his constellation magic to change the reality of fate, allowing you to teleport 2 units per turn from anywhere to anywhere outside of 9, all while you convert potential spellcasting energy and an engine of the gods on Triceratops into prodigious summoning. Your bravery is incredible, a 10 across the board, and most of your units enjoy immunity to Rend 1. Clouds of Skinks make tricky screens with their retreat instead of fight ability, and Ripperdactyls swoop in from teleports or summoning to perform deadly charges. Your ancient war scrolls have been in need of upgrades for a while, however, and there are a lot of traps here. Saurus, Croak, and sadly the Carnosaurs are all traps. Hobby. There is an unsettling amount of finecast in the Seraphon line, though most of them are still plastic. Many are old sculpts that show their age. Scales are trivially easy to paint for somebody new to the hobby. Base coat, wash, and dabs of color nearly carry you across the finish line. For advanced painters, the scales, feathers, and bones are a great opportunity for colorful creativity. Acquisition $3. Average price and difficulty for an AoS army, though the cost is increased by needing a large summoning sideboard, and your start collecting box is possibly the worst in the game, featuring 0 playable units. Difficulty 2 stars. 2 teleports per turn and excellent summoning remove a lot of difficulty you would normally encounter while playing Age of Sigmar. Your war scrolls are generally subpar, however, and you have few really tanky units. Also, skink positioning has a high skill ceiling. List building difficulty 4 stars. This is the hard part. So many traps to fall into, many battalion options or going without, lots of different things you can do. If care isn't taken in this step, you can end up with a pile of hot garbage that not even free teleports can save. Competitiveness Tier 2. The sheer power of your shenanigans is off the chain, carrying Tier 3 quality war scrolls into knocking on Tier 1's door with tight play. If they keep these battle traits when they get their new book, they will be terrifying. Pros. 1 or 2 teleports every turn, excellent screening and objective grabbing battle line, good summoning, army-wide bravery 10 and immunity to rend 1, some good battalion options, strong on battle plans, good hordes. Cons, low damage, poor command abilities, and I hope you like painting skinks. Daughters of Cain. A scheming and ancient elven sorceress named Marti was, like all other elven souls, devoured by Slaanesh during the end times. So powerful and furious was she that she clawed her way out of the god's mouth and fell into the realms, although forever changed by the god of excess's insides. Like the Hulk, when she gets mad she turns into beast mode and becomes a massive Lamian half-woman half-winged snake monster that can't ever die on the table. Almost. She rules the Daughters of Cain, a murder cult that worships an old, dead elven god of murder that they insist is still alive. Spoiler, she's siphoning all the worship power into herself to become a god just like her son Malarian. Who are her daughters? A massive horde of naked, insane, dark elf, frenzied berserkers and half-snake monsters. Behind them drive wheeled platform chariot wagons of spikes, cauldrons of blood, animated statues of Cain with flaming swords, and a bunch of witch elf priests hanging off the sides like in Mad Max. Ritual murder and sacrifice is very common, but they'll fight chaos, so yet more evidence that Grand Alliance order does not mean Grand Alliance good guys. On the table, your battle trait is Blood Rights, an army-wide progressively cumulative series of combat buffs that capstone at battle shock immunity and rerolling ones to save. You also enjoy an army-wide 6-up Shrug, which, on units near your Hagnar General, usually a Slaughter Queen on Cauldron of Blood, it is improved to a 5-up. And on one unit with a prayer, that 5-up gets to reroll. Crazy durability for naked frenzied berserkers that are super cheap and super damaging. Your game plan is point and click. Load up on buffs, on a cheap cloud of witch elves, run and charge forward, and drop a bucket of dice onto whatever poor soul they run into. I say bucket, and that's not an exaggeration. It's 120 attacks, rerolling ones to hit, and rerolling all failed wounds, often at rend 1 and sometimes at damage 2 depending on bravery. When all your buffs line up, it's not uncommon to do 50 plus damage after saves, even when only 20 of them are in range to attack. Hag Queens give resource-free battle shock immunity plus a strong combat buff. Marti is strong but optional. Sisters of Slaughter are a tricky alternative to witch elves. Snakes and Doomfire Warlocks are okay but ancillary. The only true traps are bow snakes and any clan that isn't Hagnar. Yes, I know there's a movement shenanigan clan, and it's okay, but it just doesn't hold up. Hobby, a true challenge. Harder even than Deepkin. So much skin, so many faces, and they have to be pretty, which is harder than painting ugly. Lots of models as well. That being said, fairly new plastic and great sculpts. Painting Marti would be a joy. Acquisition $5, quite possibly the most expensive Age of Sigmar army. These ladies are not cheap, and you need a lot of them. The Cauldron Guard box is a good buy and can make up a lot of your heroes, but still. Difficulty 2 stars. There are a lot of positioning requirements and opportunities to make minor but costly mistakes with how fragile most of your girls can be without any of their buffs. That being said, even a fairly point-and-click playstyle will shred people. Diligent and tight play will be imperative at the top tables, however, and that's probably where you'll end up. Undefeated mirror matches tend to require all 5 stars. List building difficulty 3 stars. The good stuff is obvious, and filling in the cracks is the difference between a great list and an okay list. Competitiveness tier 1S. Your only weakness is shooting, though your heroes are highly resistant to sniping. And due to your buff-centric playstyle, it can sometimes be hard to project full power to multiple places at once, and you are a slave to those 3-up die rolls. Luckily, shooting sucks for the most part, so people leaning on mediocre ranged will probably lose to the field before they make it to the top tables. Dodge Skaven and Godspeed. Pros. Fast, hordes, excellent buffs, prayers, and spells, S-tier damage, Nurgle tier durability on select units, easy battle shock immunity, invincible flying monster. Cons. High enemy bravery can counter half of one of your buffs, low rend, Death Star positioning requirements, quote-unquote weak to shooting, chaff screens can waste your time. Caradron Overlords. Note, one of the factions most likely to be getting a 2nd edition update book soon, and boy do they need it. Steampunk ultra-capitalist sky pirate dwarves led by Cave Johnson from Portal 2. They live in massive aircraft carrier cities in the clouds and follow the Caradron Code. This is a supreme constitutional document that each city has different interpretations of. and each article, amendment, and footnote gives different game rules. Technically it's not steampunk, it's aetherpunk, as the steam fuel they use is magical aether gold called Grungni's Breath. 3 classes of gun-toting, crew-hauling ships above pressure suit gun lines and armored rocketeers with chainsaws, and attack on Titan grapnel launchers that pull them across the map. AoS is sweet. On the table, 1 or 2 chemists and a bunch of Arcanaut company is a good place to start, along with a big unit of Thunderers after the recent points drop. Endrin riggers are the glassiest of glass cannons, but flying Ren 2 cavalry can be a good choice. Lord Magnate himself isn't half bad for his points now. Hobby. Model-wise, they really outdid themselves on this one. Incredibly detailed ships and troops. Don't let the awful default paint scheme fool you, this army is gorgeous. Metals, leather, and washes will go a long way, and the masks protect new painters from faces. For advanced painters, there's so much detail here that I might almost issue a warning. If you are a perfectionist, I just want you to know that there's like 2,000 rivets on an ironclad. Acquisition, $4. KO ain't cheap, and you want a lot of bodies. Your start collecting is bad. Difficulty 3 stars. Standard difficulty for an AoS army. Your main things are initial deployment and ship minigame. -1 for shooting is easy and simple mechanics, +1 for fragile and slow. List building difficulty 3 stars. There's a lot of room for choices here, but also a lot of traps, and previous ways to build the army are mostly all changed for the worse. Also, you need to scour FAQs because war scrolls and rules have been nerfed or changed so many times that only about half of the things printed in the book work the way they say they do. New book can't come soon enough. Competitiveness Tier 3. With a min-maxed list fighting against an army that's weak to Ren 2 shooting, you can really feel like a Tier 2 army. But there are lots of bad battle plans for you and lots of bad matchups for you, even amongst other Tier 3 factions. Pros. Lots of Ren 2, good range, potentially low drops. One of the few factions that can dunk on Nagash if he gets in range. Cons. Weak to being attacked. No magic, no command abilities, no mortal wound output, vulnerable heroes that are slow, bad on many battle plans, army lists are spammy because there are only 3 units in the whole book that are worth using. Almost every war scroll in the printed book is wrong and has been changed for the worse since its release. Your fast units are kamikaze that explode to beta strikes, and everything else is slow. Hard countered by half the meta. Sylvaneth. Note, everything is about to change because their book was just announced, but we know no real information yet, and I gotta release the video eventually. The Brexit port fiasco that has delayed them gave me a perfect opportunity to do it, so I'll be adding a Sylvaneth to the next video as soon as we know more. An army of furious forest spirits, led by ancient behemoth-class treant spellcasters. With the honorable mention of Durthu and his unbelievably huge sword, the most upset award goes to Drycha, an elven soul spirit wearing beehive and ironbark power armor. They are led by a living goddess of life, riding to war on a garage-sized stag beetle as a mount. AoS is sweet. She paved the way for much of civilization with her realm-altering life powers in the Age of Myth before getting dumpstered by Nurgle when he turned Gairan into his personal garden of rot. She's back, and she is not happy. This army is a great hobby opportunity for seasonal forestry and lots of little colorful forest friends on the behemoths. Alariel is possibly the most beautiful model in the whole game. They're definitely going to use terrain, possibly a lot of terrain. They used to be able to automatically win many battle plans by being 1 drop and teleporting tar pit anvils onto most of the objectives turn 1. It's unknown if this mechanic will still be in their game plan. Difficulty unknown, acquisition unknown, probably $3, maybe 4, depending on how much terrain you have to buy. And tier, currently high tier 2, unknown for the new book. Pro, you're getting a new book and everything might change. Con, your game plan right now is pretty unique, and so if it changed, that might suck. Fire Slayers. Long ago in the Age of Myth, Sigmar woke a god from slumber and welcomed him to the realms. He was Grimnir, the warrior god of Duardin. Feeling in debt for the favor, he demanded Sigmar immediately name an opponent to slay and vowed to settle his debt here and now. Sigmar named Valkatrix, the zodiacal god-beast mother of salamanders and the worm that first birthed flame into the world. Grimnir agreed and then charged after her. They killed each other immediately in double KO fashion, the resulting explosion sending millions of Shika no Tama, molten Urgold pieces of Grimnir, to scatter across the realms. His children, the Fire Slayers, search for these pieces, but not to reassemble their god, no. He wouldn't want that. They smith them into runes of power and hammer them into their flesh, which gives them bath salts level berserker powers. As such, they fight naked and are completely insane and almost can't die. They enslave and ride children of Volcatrix called Magmadroths to war, which are mighty draconic water balloons filled with lava. On the table, your battle trait is the Rune System. Each turn, you can blaze one to grant you an army-wide buff, ranging from movement, combat, battle shock, ranged, etc. You also have a Magmatic Battle Forge, a terrain piece that you carry onto battle that enhances your prayers and invocations. Hearthguard Berserkers are your standout unit, and while a tad shorter, these dudes are straight-up Spartans. 2 wounds each, rune-empowered armor, good attacks, and a 4-up ward or hair save, reflected in the lore by their Urgold-fueled toughness and an unwillingness to suffer the embarrassment of dying around their battle brothers. They are expensive, but possibly the strongest grinder unit in the game. Rune Smiters can tunnel a unit of Slayers into a deep strike, which is pretty good. Battlesmith has a strong buff. Harmdar Lodge gives you battle shock immunity if in enemy territory or near an objective, and allows you to participate in the activation wars by attacking at the beginning of combat for command points. Rejoice, as Magmadroths aren't terrible anymore, and you can add some sweet-looking variety to legions of runic flesh and mohawks. Hobby. Hair, skin, and faces are hard to paint for beginners, and possibly a bit samey for veterans. Magmadroths, Magmatic Invocations, Heroes, and the Battle Forge are pretty sweet though. Acquisition. $5, tied with Daughters of Cain for most expensive army. Their start collecting is maybe okay depending on what you're doing, but their boxes are expensive, especially the Hearthguard ones, and they come with 5 guys. Difficulty 3 stars. Your dudes are made out of meteoric iron and take massive punishment before cracking, and have a deep strike, and have strikes first, so why isn't this lower? Brutal wholly within positioning requirements and slow. List building difficulty 3 stars. There's obvious good stuff and obvious hero buffs, but some tricky parts in there that require choices. 30-man units are probably too unwieldy for your wholly within buffs. Doomseeker and Grimwrath Berserker are both heroes, but critically don't have the leader subtype, so you can play them past the 6 leader limit, which means more heroes near guys you want heroes nearby, etc. Competitiveness, still early, but high tier 2. If you want a hot take, I predict tier 1 once more people start playing them, but honestly, who knows? They're new. Pros. Defensive powerhouse that doesn't give up offense to do it. Access to always strikes first, great buffs, prayers, a deep strike, laughs at battle shock and mortal wounds. Cons. Slow, elite, no magic, bad ranged, saturated with wholly within, and tedious positioning requirements. Free peoples. Warning, no battle tome, but they might just get one? I'd put the chances below 1st edition armies with books and below Gutbusters, but above Wanderers in tier 4. God-granted powers? Nope. Super soldiers and legendarily named heroes? Nope. Flamboyant outfits and huge cod pieces? Yes. Ranks and files of mere men with rifles, greatswords, and cavalry making a stand against the forces of hell itself. Respect. Put a feather in your cap. On the table you run great companies of combined arms style units, who, when one is charged, another nearby gets to either charge in the opponent's charge phase, or shoot immediately to support their fellow countrymen. Gun lines in back, swords and boards in front, and march orderly forward to face death like gentlemen. Standout units are Free Guild General on Griffin as a solid cheap monster or 2, Free Guild General on foot with banner for a strong buff, crossbowmen for large units, handgunners for small units, and Free Guild Guard with swords and shields always. Traps include all your mounted options, their battalion, and with great sadness the fantastic looking greatsworders. Your general's command ability has a strong AoE hit and wound bonus, but you can't move any of your guys for that turn after using it. And your ranged only gets its full bonuses when not moving as well. Combine that with no good movement besides General on Griffin and you start to see an issue with Free Guild, slow and often mechanically immobile. Allying in a decent grabber unit is imperative, so 6 Morsar Guard or Evocators on Dracoline if GA, or 6 Vanguard Paladars for exactly 400 points if in faction. Hobby. It really is a charming aesthetic of reds and whites, big cod pieces and feathers and caps. Your heroes look great, and man are your troops sculpts showing their age though. Good for new painters and old, however, as blood and mud-stained militia are simple enough for newcomers, while crisp colors and careful faces are fun for veterans. Acquisition $3. Your boxes lean on the cheap side, but you do need a lot of guys, and you have no start collecting. Difficulty 4 stars. Standard difficulty for an AoS army, but the price of failure or bad luck is very high. You don't have much of a hero phase, and some tough choices need to be made with initial deployment and positioning. List building difficulty 3 stars. Plus 10 this unit, minus 10 that unit as far as the eye can see, and choosing between allies is very hard, putting you between entirely giving up on something to get something else you desperately need, like no wizards if cavalry, etc. Going Grand Alliance opens up a lot of options, but you lose out on your fun allegiance abilities, and you'll find the number of free guild units you're using rapidly shrinking. Competitiveness Tier 3. If your opponent was hoping shooting was dead, you're feeling pretty good. But mostly you'll be outmaneuvered and simply outclassed on war scrolls, spells, prayers, and shenanigans. Pros. Good shooting, decent hordes, cheap monsters, charge phase tricks. Cons. Slow and often immobile. Positioning requirements, either no magic or no speed, no mortal wounds, always giving up something for what you end up with. Wanderers. Warning no book and unclear if they'll get one soon. Chances are maybe higher than Tier 4, but below Gutbusters. Noble and fierce, these exiled elven nomads travel the wilds of the realms, planting waystones to amplify their 4G network and forest powers. They had a falling out with Alariel and the Sylvaneth when Nurgle turned Ghyran into his own personal plague garden of rot. They decided to peace out instead of become extinct after many of them contracted horrific diseases with no help in sight. 800 years later, Sylvaneth is still mad, but honestly they both need to apologize. Wanderers turn up to trade and defend free cities from time to time, but spend most of their time wandering mystic realmways out past the edges of civilization. On the table, your battle trait is Realm Wanderers, allowing 1 unit per turn to meld off of a board edge and appear somewhere else along the same board edge outside of 9, making your Glade Guard hit-and-run style guerrilla archers. If near your general, you can pop out from any board edge, not just the one you left from, and Wanderers units can always retreat and shoot. Kiting your opponents via battlefield edges is difficult but rewarding, though it's a shame objectives are often nowhere near them. Standout units are Glade Guard, who have a once per game Arcane Bodkins to crack, granting Ren 3 shots for that turn. Eternal Guard have impressive durability for dirt cheap, especially in cover. Large units of Wildwood Rangers make great use of 25mm bases and 2-inch reach for that classic Elven Swordmaster slicing, and they bag and tag monsters, though they don't work so well in smaller units, and their armor is paper. Spellweavers are a solid wizard choice, with a once per game automatic counterspell each. Waywatchers are a solid ranged hero choice, and a Nomad Prince makes a fine general. Traps include all the other heroes, Wild Riders, the Battalion, and sadly the gorgeous Sisters of the Thorn and Watch. Overpriced with a spell better suited for GA soup than your own army for the former, and simply unimpressive shooting even with their tricks for their points for the latter. Hobby. Forest colors will be easy enough for new painters, while big banners and nice movement with a strong theme can be a fun challenge for veterans. Lots of conversion opportunities as well. It's a shame you don't have a monster centerpiece, though. Acquisition $3. If buying retail, it's probably 4, as you are Horde Army through and through, but there's lots of old collections to pick up from sales sites. No start collecting, though. Difficulty 5 stars. This is what Idoneth Deepkin would be like without eels. Everything has low armor, and there are lots of exacting positioning and prediction that needs to be made to get your game plan rolling, with a high price of failure or bad luck. List building difficulty 4 stars. Your game plan absolutely needs to start before you even choose your battle line, and there are not only a lot of traps, but also some hard ally choices. Might I suggest 10 Sequitors and a Lord Castellant, or a Salston Prime? Competitiveness Tier 3. For all your work on tricks and traps, the House of Cards can fall down as soon as your opponent rolls a surprise long charge, or has some newfangled OP war scroll, ethereal, or always strikes first cheese. Pros. Pinpoint surgical Ren 3 shooting, good damage hordes, board edge tricks, auto counterspells. Cons. Weak to being attacked. Realm Wanderers is often a lot of work for a little payoff. No mortal wounds, no monsters, weak shooting when not using arcane bodkins. Dispossessed. Warning no battle tome, but one of the old factions that just might get one. We've gotten some clues and I'd put them under Gutbusters, but above the other non-book Tier 3s. Banished from their mountain Khazalid keeps in the Age of Chaos by daemons, and abandoned by their god Grungni after he died from depression, the dispossessed wander the world in dejection, Take how dour the average dwarf is and multiply it by our god died of a broken heart, and that's dispossessed. A true Duarden soldiers on, however, and that's what they did. With their hands and hammers, they built the great cities that people of all races occupy as the bastions against chaos. Hammerhall, Anvilgard, Greywater Fastness, the Living City, Tempest's Eye, Hallowheart, and the Phoenicium. Big armor, big beards, big scores to settle. Dispossessed are here to deliver that come-at-me-bro style gameplay that you loved in Total War Warhammer on Steam. On the table, your battle traits are always past battle shock on a 3-up and the grudge system, which, while a cool idea, only lets you reroll hit rolls of 1 against strangely specific units, and reroll 1s to hit is a weak buff when it's on units with a relatively low number of attacks that hit on 4s. Your standout units are Warriors, which are well-costed Horde Anvils that can shield wall instead of run or charge, Iron Drakes, an expensive but durable group of Rend 1 shooting, and the mighty Rune Lord, who hammers spells with a +2 unbind, and hands out the army's only great buffs. A prayer that either adds 1 Rend or 6-up ward to target unit. A few of these guys is a must. Warden King's buff isn't half bad either. Longbeards are elite troops with a buff to hand out, but have a little less durability per point than Warriors and a worse buff than Rune Lords or Warden Kings, and so are an optional supplement as MSU. For your combat troops, some people like Ironbreakers, some people like Hammers, but really just choose guys that have more than 1 attack per model and support them. Traps include Quarrelers and Thunderers, allies that don't have good movement, the Battalion, and especially the Unforged, who might as well be the poster child for why melee slow assassin on foot is a bad archetype. Hobby. Beginners will find mostly metallic paint and washes to be a nice introduction to the hobby, but may be put off by the sheer number of similar looking dudes you have to paint. It is a Horde army after all. Veterans might get bored of sameness and chafe at trying non-metallic metal on 100+ models, though there are lots of good conversion ideas for a centerpiece. I must say that kit bashing up a Celestin Prime to look like Big Daddy from Bioshock is tempting. Acquisition $4. Horde armies are expensive, and you have no start collecting boxes, but as an older army perhaps you can find some good deals secondhand. Difficulty 2 stars. It's not that they're easy to play necessarily, it's just that you don't have a lot of decisions to make, as 2nd edition's myriad of new rules and options have passed this faction by with no wizards and few options behind. List building difficulty 4 stars. Really it's probably 3 stars, but after avoiding the traps you start to agonize over ally decisions, and this is made harder by trying to polish this chunk of coal into a diamond. Get a flying wizard, a Celestin Prime, or some sort of fast cavalry ally, or admit defeat and go GA for Dwarf Soup, where a Rune Lord and some warriors supplement KO shooting and Fire Slayer grinding. Competitiveness low tier 3. Their units are mostly overcosted and underperform, with no good tricks, and are the slowest of the slow. Units of Iron Drakes may surprise people, and massive regiments of warriors are decently tanky, but you just really needed a book in 1st edition. And you still need a book in 2nd edition. Pros. Good anvil hordes. Expensive but good shooting, good unbinding. Cons. 4-inch move and mechanics that punish you for running and charging. Bad allegiance abilities. Everything but warriors and Rune Lord are overcosted, bad on hero/monster battle plans, no good tricks, no mortal wounds, low volume of attacks, inaccurate, and whoever wrote Ancestral Pickaxe is officially in the Book of Grudges. Grand Alliance Destruction. Iron Jaws. Note, one of the factions most likely to get an updated 2nd edition book, and, like all destruction armies, boy do they need it. One time, the destruction god Gorka Morka punched a mountain to make it explode, to prove to Sigmar that he could punch a mountain and make it explode. In succeeding at this feat of strength, a piece of knucklebone chipped off. From his armored bone shard grew the legendary Auric Gordrak, the Fist of Gork. The double meaning to his name wasn't the only thing clever about Gordrak, though, as his breed of orcs are bigger, more brutal, and more cunning than the others. He started the Iron Jaws. Their troops are each as big as a normal orc boss, their bosses are mega-bosses, and the biggest mega-bosses ride savage primeval dragons named Maw Crushes into war. Their armor is made from scrap metal that they pound into form with their fists to prove how tough they are. And it's painted yellow to show Sigmar that Ironjawz are the real golden boys. On the table, your battle traits are Mighty Destroyers, a hero phase move that each hero can give to a nearby unit if they roll a 6-up, so basically never, or on a 4-up for your general, so half the time. If you're within 12 inches of the enemy, however, you must charge instead, which, besides destructive bulk, serves no real purpose in the hero phase and makes this lukewarm ability even worse. You also have Smashing and Bashing. If you wipe out an enemy unit in combat, you get to activate a unit of yours that hasn't fought yet right away, instead of later in the phase. This ends up being situationally okay, but like Mighty Destroyers and many other destruction abilities, frustratingly random. Your standout units are a Megaboss on Maw-Krusha, a Death Star of AoE stacking Wind Fury extra attack bonuses that randomly work or don't, but only last until the end of turn. He's also your army's only flying unit, and so the only one that isn't fully blackballed by chaff. War Chanters pass out resource-free stacking hit bonuses, though they have trouble keeping up with your guys, and the buff again only lasts until end of turn. Gorgruntas are your well-costed fast anvil cavalry, and form the backbone of your troops. Without a Wah, they can be a bit pillow-fisted, but they do have rend. Brutes are your melee grinders, and with full buffs can kill basically anything, though they are slow and have some bravery problems. Weird Knob Shaman is a surprisingly good unbinder in the early turns, though you have to keep a lot of orc bodies near him to maintain those bonuses. Megaboss on foot, when given some artifact to help with his speed, generally a Thermal Rider cloak, ends up being a nice alternative source of Wah after your Maw-Krusha dies, or to project power to more than one part of the table at once. Your battalions are trivially easy to qualify for, and going one drop with a Mega Battalion is common. Traps include Ardboys, who seem on paper to be pretty good, but they're just always a disappointment on the table. They just don't do enough. Brute Fist Battalion, Ardfist Battalion, and Gordrak himself, who is super expensive in an already expensive and elite army, and he can't even capture in places of arcane power due to not technically having an artifact, despite his war scroll detailing the 2 named artifacts he holds. Hobby. Dirty orc skin and dinged up pounded iron armor will be easy to paint for beginners, while good skin blends and rust and weathering will be fun exercise for veterans. Throughout, both will have a blast with conversions and additions to the classic orc silliness, brutality, and of course lots of spikes. Acquisition $3. You are elite, which is nice, though Gorgrunta are expensive. Your start collecting is probably worth picking up for the free unit of Ardboys even if they aren't used right now. Who knows what the new book will hold. Difficulty 4 stars. Surprisingly tricky to play for a seemingly run-up-and-smash army. But you have no shooting phase, and all your abilities have restrictive range requirements and are tied behind annoying randomness, often requiring you to stick your neck out and take risks for things other armies can just know is going to work automatically. List building difficulty 2 stars. Avoid the traps, pick a battalion, and you're just about good. The only hard part is allies, it's generally not worth it, and what realm artifacts to pick. Competitiveness Tier 3. You are a melee combo army that can't deal with chaff and all but skips magic and shooting phases, with okay abilities locked behind annoying randomness and have problems with battle shock. To get the most out of your buffs, you need to be in a Death Star formation, which is not conducive to playing the objective game. Pros. Fun. And I'm not just joking here. This is one of the few armies in the game that can be really fun, win or lose. Big combo bonus attacks tornado, good mobile anvils, sometimes good unbinding, can sometimes be fast if you can't stop rolling 6s. Cons. Dwarven slowness the rest of the time. Bravery and battle shock problems, can't deal with chaff, straight up loses to strikes first with no way to play around it, no shooting, weak magic after about turn 1, with no spell lores. Inconsistent everything, elite, lots of positioning requirements, buffs fall off at end of turn. When Maw-Krusha dies, it's probably game over, and many armies can do that immediately. Bone Splitters. Note, one of the armies most likely to receive a 2nd edition battle tome, although probably not more likely than Ironjawz or Gutbusters. Bone Splitters are the most savage and unhinged of all orc kind. You don't choose the Bone Splitter's life, it chooses you, in the form of reoccurring dreams, strange visions, and violent hallucinations. They can see the Wah energy coursing through all living things, and they get swept up in its tide, eventually becoming too erratic and dangerous for even their own tribes to deal with, and are banished. Eventually, their mad wanderings are found by a Wurgog prophet, who lets them know that despite what they've gone through, they have never tripped balls as hard as when they get on the good stuff. Possessed by ghostly emanations of Gorkamorka himself, Bone Splitters sprint into combat, mostly naked with war paint and bone trophies. The Wa energy turns aside mortal wounds and enhances their kill power as they swarm enemies and take them out Stone Age style. They particularly enjoy taking down monsters and behemoths, because who do they think they are anyway? On the table, your battle traits are Warpaint, which grants you a 6-up ward for your whole army. Although your saves are bad, mostly 6-ups, a 6 will always pass armor saves for you, so that's good. You also have Monster Hunter bonuses, a table you roll on before attacking a monster to get some minor wound bonuses. If you kill one, you gain Battle Shock immunity. You also have a surprisingly strong cadre of wizards with good spell lores. Whatever stuff they're on, among other things, apparently grants them savage magic, and their spells crit on a double. Your standout units are, well, a bunch of wizard heroes, depending on what flavor of Bone Splitters you're doing, be it ranged, melee, cavalry, or big stab of monster hunting. You only have enough points for probably 1.5 of those strats, and lists that try to do more than that end up spreading themselves too thin. Big stabbas may look silly, but they will skewer monsters. Arrow boys and a Cunnin' Ruck are extremely expensive now, but your arrows will blot out the sun, just the same. Maniacs are a good foundation. Honestly, most of your dudes can be good with the right support. For allies, an Orc war boss, either on foot or on a wyvern, give you a solid Wa buff as well. Hobby. It's silly looking prehistoric orcs. If you like that, you'll know if you like that. It's a horde army though, so standard horde warning applies. Acquisition, $4. You are horde, but your boxes mercifully come with 20 guys. Though you don't have a start collecting, and some of your units are just straight up not for sale any longer, like big stabbas or in compendium tier 4 stuff like Orc Warboss on Wyvern. Difficulty 4 stars. When everyone has a 6-up save, and the well-known weak link to the chain are fragile heroes, it can be hard to stop your opponent from killing all your stuff. Also, moving 100 models and rolling buckets of dice in a reasonable amount of time will take some practice. List building difficulty 3 stars. It may seem a bit overwhelming at first, but pick a strategy and support it. You can't be good at everything in a Bone Splitters list. Once you have, however, Guy plus thing that buffs Guy and spell selection is your main hurdle. Competitiveness tier 2. Protect your heroes, get those spells off, and you can bury your opponents in weight of dice. And Cunnin' Ruck still has some teeth even after 3 GHBs of points increases have left them a little sparse. The Strike's first activation wars have hit melee Bone Splitters hard, but that's not exactly unique to you. Pros. Good magic, good buffs, buckets of dice, hordes, randomly good movement, good battalions, a 6-up ward. Cons. Fragile heroes, low rend, low mortal wounds, basically no armor. Gut Bustas. Warning, no battle tome, but the most likely candidate for getting one amongst armies without. Ogres are almost twice as tall as a man, with a mountainous physique and frightening intelligence for their size. They are cursed with an insatiable hunger for meat and a magical constitution able to digest anything, even undead and creatures of Nurgle. Gutbustas are monstrously strong and swing logging equipment as weapons. They wear little in the way of armor, as even the most basic ogre has double the wounds of a knight and his horse. On the table you don't have allegiance abilities. Well, technically Battle Line If is an allegiance ability, so I guess you got that. Grand Alliance Destruction it is. And theirs aren't very good, so. Standout units are a minimum of 2 butchers with Cauldron who, besides being wizards, can reach into their meat bucket and pull out a random buff or choke on a spinal cord and take some mortal wounds. The buffs vary, and you have to roll for them because Destruction is cursed with annoying randomness. But the good one is +1 to hit on any target unit, and it stacks. When all your dudes hit on 4s, this is just about a necessity. After that, a Tyrant, for his powerful command ability that, after smashing a unit with his fist to prove he's serious, makes them battle shock immune for the rest of the game, or until he dies. Protect that man. Optionally, you can give him a Gyre Strike, and his massive 3-inch hook scythe can do 18 damage in a turn, so it's a risk you often take to put him in harm's way. What's good with battle shock immunity? 60 idiot grots guarding your home base or acting as a long screen comes to mind. Ogres make up your battle line, and they are quite good for their points as MSU, 6-man, or as a discount massive regimented of 12. Give them 2 weapons always, and they have impressive wound density, and although they lack rend, 2 damage hits go a long way. They're a solid grinder. For allies, although you're Grand Alliance, so they aren't technically allies per se, accept no substitute for a Frostlord on Stonehorn to shore up your general slowness and lack of rend. Also, butchers can buff him. Give him Ethereal and don't look back. Traps and allies-ish traps include Lead Belchers, Fire Bellies, Iron Blasters, Grot Scrap Launchers, Gorgers, Allied Mournfang, Allied Thundertusks, and Allied Ale Guzzler Gargants. Iron Guts and Man-Eaters are expensive, but okay. Hobby. Dark Ogre skin, metals, leather, fur, and bones are a great introduction to the hobby, and different material types, all while not needing to be super clean. Non-metallic metals, skin blending, tattoos, and banners offer a good challenge for veterans, and as for customization, ogres mostly fit together well between the boxes, although you will need some green stuff. Acquisition $2. Elite and cheap boxes, just how I like it. You don't have a start collecting, and I would definitely recommend building your own butcher. That ugly Finecast lump is $60 US. Lots of your random tertiary ogres are Finecast, like Firebellies, Heroes, and Man-Eaters, so beware. But ogres, grots, and frostlords are nice plastic. Difficulty 2 stars. Fairly point and click. Well, okay, roll 2 dice and see if you get the thing, and then click, and then march up. You don't have a lot of abilities necessarily, but choosing where to send your Frostlord and keeping your Tyrant alive for Battleshock immunity are your main things here. List building difficulty 4 stars. It's not particularly hard to build a Gutbuster list in theory. Avoid the traps and double down on your strengths. But most Gutbusters players have collections from old Warhammer Fantasy Battle, and so you need to fight against nostalgia from times past and pick the good stuff that's good now. Resisting the temptation of allied Thundertusks is also apparently hard, but those things suck. Competitiveness high tier 3. Gutbusters are kind of a success story. Here's a faction with old war scrolls and no allegiance abilities, and yet with some min-maxing, they can be a decent grinder force on the table. Pros. Good grinder battle line, Battleshock immune chaff / home base, strong ethereal monster if buffed. Cons. Kinda slow with no movement shenanigans, no good ranged options, poor allegiance abilities since you're Grand Alliance, low rend, low mortal wounds, butchers are bad spellcasters, and you have no spell lores. Beastclaw Raiders. Note, one of the factions most likely to be getting a 2nd edition battle tome, and boy do they need it. So a normal ogre army is made up of giant humanoid monsters who eat people. But Beastclaw takes it a step further and makes them all mounted cavalry. They ride woolly mammoths that shoot ice beams and gorilla oxen the size of monster trucks with super regenerating granite skeletons. Even the basic battle line are mounted on woolly rhinoceros-like creatures called Mournfang. They are followed at all times by a magical cursed Everwinter storm that freezes and kills everything in its path. Which usually isn't much, because wherever the Beastclaw go, they kill everyone, eat everything, steal anything they can carry, and ride on. Basically winter-themed ogre Mad Max with behemoths instead of cars. AoS is sweet. On the table, your battle traits are Beastclaw Stampede, which lets you reroll 1s to wound if you charge, which turns about 1 in 12 attacks into a hit, so pretty bad. You also have the Everwinter table, which you roll on because destruction is cursed with annoying randomness, to find out what the Great Storm will do for that turn. Either it's reroll 1s to save, move 3 inches but not out of combat, or on a 5 or 6, basically nothing. Your standout units are a Frostlord on Stonehorn with Ethereal Amulet, and Icefall Yetis are okay, I guess? Traps include Mournfang, Icebrow Hunter, every Thundertusk, Huskard on Stonehorn, Beast Rider Stonehorn, and every battalion. Hobby-wise, Beastclaw are awesome. You get to spend hero-quality time on every model, and the monsters and ogres are a dream to convert and paint. However, many of your other models are, Finecast. Acquisition. $3. Surprised? In theory, this could be the cheapest army to collect. The start collecting features a behemoth and 4 Mournfang, so just get 3 boxes and you have yourself a 2K list. Problem. Mournfang are terrible. Realistically, you're looking at a few behemoths and a whole bunch of yetis, which are Finecast and $50 US per 3, which bumps Beastclaw up into middle-of-the-road army cost even though they're elite. Difficulty 2 stars. You don't have a lot of options or powers here, so mechanically it's pretty easy to play Beastclaw. What moves this up to 2 stars is Yeti positioning and tricks, and the fact that mistakes or bad luck will instantly lose you the game. List building difficulty 3 stars. Similarly to Dispossessed, you have the chunk of coal problem, where you're always trying to find a way that everyone is wrong, and if you just look hard enough, there's a competitive list hidden in there somewhere. There isn't. And no, the answer isn't Bragath's Beasthammer unless you're playing against a parrot. Play Gutbusters with the Frostlord on Stonehorn, or wait for a new book. The full 400 ally points can kind of solve one problem, but you have many problems. I'm adding an extra star of list building difficulty here because it takes a while to realize that Thunder Tusks aren't worth playing at all. Looks can be deceiving. Competitiveness, the bottom of tier 3. Beastclaw Raiders holds the unenviable position as statistically worst army in the game that has a battle tome, and is weaker than most of the armies that don't. Pros: fast ethereal monster, good rend, some mortal wounds, good on 2 battle plans. Cons: bad on 16 battle plans. Super elite, low army wounds, everything but your general is very fragile and has bad damage. Bad allegiance abilities, no wizards, prayers, or buffs, no flying or movement shenanigans, straight loses to always strike first, no ranged worth playing, hard countered by hit penalties and hordes and chaff and ward saves. Gloomspite Gits. While order and chaos toiled in endless wars for the surface of the mortal realms, far below in dank tunnels and bioluminescent caverns, the Gloomspite Gits. The Gloomspite Gits combined grot flesh with fibrous shroom wreath, fed Gizmo after midnight, and filled their lungs and minds with psychedelically enhanced magical spore gas of prophetic hallucination. At the height of malign sorcery, the bad moon rose, and they burst forth like a puffball's fruit body, disgorging teeming hordes of raving lunatics, genetically engineered Troggoth hulks, and bouncy, rabid teeth on legs. If anyone trips balls harder than bone splitters, it's Gloomspite Gits, injecting some much-needed, though morbid, silliness into Age of Sigmar's mythical tale of grim, endless war. Let's have some fun. On the table, your battle trait is the Bad Moon. On turn 1, it starts at a board corner, and starting turn 2, you randomly roll to see if it moves and how much, because destruction is cursed with annoying randomness. Sometimes it stays in a corner and the light shines on nothing. Sometimes on turn 3 you roll a 6 and it jumps over the center of the table to the far quadrant and you miss out on most of your battle traits for the game, etc. Whichever table quadrant the moon is in is basked in its maddening light, or table-wide if in the middle. When wholly under the light, your dudes get bonuses depending on what keyword they have, like a bonus command point, run and charge, reroll once to hit, +1 they cast and -1 enemy cast, etc. You also set up a Bad Moon Loon Shrine, a huge terrain piece that grants your units wholly within a 12-inch battle shock immunity, and on a 4-up can return half a slain unit of Shootas or Stabbas to the battlefield around it. Standout units are Scragrot the Loon King with his endless decanter of bonus command points, long-range rapid-fire Moon on a stick that poisons enemies with a slow burn of mortal wounds each turn until they die, Nicket's spell that can shut off an enemy artifact for the rest of the game on a 10, and his once-per-game command ability to take full control of the moon. What a stallion. Other standout units include Sneaky Snufflers to buff your dudes even if they are a tad slow, though Hand of Gork can fix that. Loon Smasha Fanatics are a common and tricky choice, secretly popping out of nowhere to ruin enemy charges and strike first. Stabbas with their hit penalty nets are great in big units, and Shootas are on the low side of playable. Just don't run any more than 20 in a unit, it's not worth it. But who cares about all that? Let's talk about the Boingy Boys. Boingrot Bounders are your maniac cavalry, bouncing into combat with a terrifying number of attacks, even without buffs, and the only downside for their aggressive cost and great quality is 2d6-inch move. But you have ways of improving that. Loon Boss on Mangler Squig is a fun choice, but optional. Rock Guts are the only playable Troggoths, though probably better suited as some other army's anvil since 60 Stabbas are better. Traps include every Troggoth keyword, with great sadness since their sculpts are glorious. Spore Splatta Fanatics, Squig Hoppers, every spider except maybe the Caster Arachnarok, although that's just like, you know, my opinion, man. And of course, as always, the much maligned Ale Guzzler Gargant and his stupid Drunken Stagger. Hobby. Massive horde army that is a daunting undertaking for painters new and old. That being said, the models, especially the new ones, are just bursting with goofy flavor and are a joy to paint. Acquisition $5. As one of the biggest horde armies, this one will hurt, and a lot of the models may be hard to acquire. No start collecting, and splitting Loon Curse is no help at all. Difficulty 5 stars, quite simply the hardest army to play. Random battle trait prediction plus Holy Within everywhere plus exacting netter placement plus hundreds of models to move per turn, plus a cavalcade of spells, abilities, ranges, buffs, and positions to balance. List building difficulty 4 stars. The keyword soup is tricky to navigate even before making tough choices like who is the general, who buffs what, who will have to stand near whom, what battalion if any, and more. You need to start thinking about deployment even while building the list. Competitiveness Tier 2. Your Ansatkumpo effort for Lonzo Ball results. For the nerds out there, that's Rock Lee effort for Krillin results. I should note, however, that he married his robot waifu and settled down for a comfortable family life, so who really won in the end? Obviously talking about Giannis here. That being said, if your randomness lands favorably and you play well, you can hang with the big boys. Pros. Good hordes, lots of hit penalties, flying cavalry, Hand of Gork teleport, can participate in the activation wars with Strike's last debuff, a bandolier of command points, can shut down enemy spellcasting if lucky, even the likes of Nagash if the planets align, limited reanimation. Cons. Lol random. Difficult positioning requirements that are often randomly ruined by things out of your control, keyword bingo. While Battle Shock isn't a terribly large issue, getting screamed at by death units and the like with 4 bravery isn't fun. Grand Alliance Death, Legions of Nagash. Nagash is the Supreme Lord of the Undead, and God of Death in all 8 realms. The book contains rules for using death units to build an army led by one of his 3 Mortarks, or even Nagash himself. Grand Host of Nagash is his faction, and serves as the default choice. Nothing in the game can stand up to the Supreme Necromancer in the magic phase, and while he is on the table, all of your units enjoy Mystic Shield and immunity to Battle Shock. Legion of Sacrament is the magic and necromancy focused faction led by his second-in-command, the Great Lich Archon the Black, whose magical might is surpassed only by Nagash himself. Legion of Blood is the aggressive vampire combat faction led by Neferata, an ancient and cunning vampire. In combat, she can slay anything outright with a prick from Akhmet Har, and her stacking AoE hit penalty can really give your opponents a hard time. And her Blood Knights and Skeletons fly on dark mists into battle. Finally, Legion of Night is the tricky faction led by the duplicitous and conniving Manfred von Karstein. His minions can ambush in from grave sites, and the already durable troops on defense are further bolstered on his side of the table. Did I say 3 Mortarks? Just announced yesterday is the inclusion of the 4th. Lady Olinder of Nighthaunt has been fully welcomed into the fold. More on this in future videos, but for now rejoice. Nighthaunt gets good battle traits at last. Your battle traits are gravesites and heroes that replenish D3 slain models within a unit, and the ability for your general to spend command points to reanimate entire wiped out units on gravesites, provided there aren't enemy models nearby. Standout units are Nagash. His magical supremacy will often shut down enemy spellcasting entirely, if within unbind range. He casts 8 spells a turn with a hefty bonus to cast, makes all your units on the table Battle Shock immune, and can flip a coin to slay an enemy model outright with Hand of Dust. Also, since death armies tend to crumble when their general dies, as you might expect, why not play the most durable one? Downside, Nagash and 1 Necromancer is already 1,000 points of heroes. Neferata is expensive and demands extra command points, but her hit debuff aura is quite strong. Archon has a strong spell and strong command ability, but is fragile. Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon might be the 2nd best monster in the game with an artifact. At least 1 Necromancer is required due to his powerful Dance Macabre spell that lets summonable units pile in twice. Other standout units are Dire Wolves, which are good boys, Skeletons, a cheap and replenishing resurrectable home base with surprising punch. For more mobility, Grimghast Reapers fit the bill, and many play 230s of these instead of Skeletons entirely. Black Knights slide in as a low-key heat, in units of 10 or more, and don't let a first glance at their war scroll fool you. They are better than Blood Knights. Traps include every single non-hero that doesn't have the summonable keyword, as that's where all the strength of your army comes from. Yes, even Morghasts in a Grand Host. Other traps include Mortis Engine and everything else built from that box, Hex Wraiths, Manfred, Blood Knights, honestly a lot of stuff, but it's all pretty obvious once you get the hang of it. Hobby. While painting 80-man skeleton or ghostly horde units can be tiresome, your excellent centerpiece models make up for this hugely. Also, dry brushing is the fast lane for decent looking bones. Acquisition $3 signs, $4 signs if not using Nagash, as it means more hordes. Your start collecting skeleton horde is okay if you're using a Mortarch, and there's a lot of secondhand skeletons and Grimcasts to pick up, but hordes are pricey. Difficulty 3 stars. A big hero phase with regen timing tricks and positioning are your main hurdles, as well as proper gravesite placement prediction. List building difficulty 2 stars. At this stage, everybody pretty much knows what's good, so avoid the traps and the lists mostly build themselves. Just remember to always take a spell portal with Nagash, and make sure you have an extra command point ready at all times to reanimate a slain massive regiment. Competitiveness Tier 1. Regeneration and reanimation are super strong, and your debuffs are great. With Nagash or Archon, making your opponent feel like he wasted every point he spent on wizards is also strong. Pros. Cheap punchy skeleton horde, flying ethereal horde, great spells, flying monster, battle shock immune with Nagash, counterbalance top, debuffs, some instant kill mechanics although unreliable, lots of regeneration, full slain unit reanimation, laughs at mortal wounds. Cons. Slow. Partial Death Star formation, opponent can zone out gravesites to prevent reanimation, no ranged, and if your general dies you basically lose. Night Haunt. Note, Legion of Grief for LON was just announced, which probably gives Night Haunt players a new, better way to play all their ghostly models, but we don't know the details yet. An indomitable new malevolence has stirred an ancient terror. No longer content to hunt civilization's edges, phantasmal forces gather into spectral armies. This is no mere haunting, but a shock assault that seeks nothing less than to destroy life itself. From the darkest pits of Shyish, the realm of death, these wraiths fight to send fresh souls down into the darkened realms from whence the dead emerge, taking cruel pleasure in knowing the torments that await their victims below. Led by impressive heroes suffering poetic punishments, your flying masses of ghostly troops would blot out the sun if it ever shined in Shyish. On the table you have many battle traits, but most of them are minor. The main ones are From the Underworld They Come, a half-army deep strike from the underworld. Works just like Stormcast except evil. Wave of Terror lets you strike first and still pile in and attack again later on in combat, on natural charge rolls of 10, meaning no bonuses. Very rare, but very powerful. You also have Spectral Summons, allowing your general to teleport a unit from anywhere to surround herself with guards. Standout units are Guardian of Souls with Mortality Glass, whose spell is a pretty good shenanigan. Knight of Shrouds with his bonus attack command ability. For pricey regen, Guardian of Souls with Nightmare Lantern and Spirit Torments are okay. Just don't look at Legions of Nagash or you'll start to feel bad. Speaking of, Grimghast Reapers are your main bread and butter unit. Chain Rasps are perfectly adequate battle line. Traps include Hex Wraiths, all the endless spells, Lady Olinder, who is too fragile for her price, Kurdos, unless you are allergic to rolling below a 5 every time, as nothing else he does is any good, and, well, a lot of stuff. Hobby. As a trigger warning for people who hate models that lean over the edges of their bases, don't even consider Night Haunt. It is madness how far these things reach, often extending almost a full pile-in distance over the edge of base, making every single combat annoying. Acquisition $1 sign. The easiest army to collect next to Stormcast, due to near limitless story boxes, battle boxes, start collecting, and people who bought half of Soul Wars and want to sell the Night Haunt. Though of course more specific lists will be pricier. Difficulty 3 stars. Even though you have lots of deep strikes and flying with a shenanigan or two, this is still hard with lots of Holy Within, lots of charge risk decisions, and high cost of failure or bad luck. List building difficulty 5 stars. You'd think this would be easy, right? Blast Grimghast Reapers into War Scroll Builder and choose some heroes with things that buff them. The 5-star challenge here is not looking at those same Grimghast Reapers you just bought and playing them in Legions of Nagash instead, and being strictly better. Competitiveness Tier 2. Ignoring Rend with ethereal flying hordes that can deep strike is pretty good, and once every game or so, you'll roll that natural 10 to charge, and get to ride the water slide of value. That being said, it seems like the units were designed with lots of regen in mind, and the army just can't do that very well. Pros: ethereal, flying, good hordes, some shenanigans, half-army deep strike, extremely rare but crazy powerful strike first double pile-in charges on a natural 10+. Cons: lots of Holy Within and annoying positioning, weak casters, weak heroes, your best ability is totally random and has a 17% chance to work. What are you, Destruction? Flesh Eater Courts. With platinum armor and regal locks of golden hair, the brave king leads his subjects into war atop his white-maned griffin. Nobles in full regalia ride behind on Pegasi, and the local legions flock to their call, rattling heirloom sabers and flying their lord's colors. A cut above the unwashed free peoples, in birth and in deed, the Flesh Eater Courts bring some much-needed chivalry to the fight against chaos. Or so they think. In reality, the king's shadow from on high looks suspiciously vampiric, his mount decayed and draconic. The soldiers' foils and finery are more bone trophies and dangling intestines. The grand delusion of the Flesh Eater Courts has these models so enthralled that the mad ghouls have only fleeting hints of their crazed cannibalistic nature. On the table, your battle traits are the Courts of Delusion, the particular madness that radiates from your Ghoul King and enthralls his subjects in different powerful ways. There are 2 grand courts, Grizzlegore and Blisterkin, or you can go vanilla and pick Feast Day. Blisterkin makes your guys faster and gives you a teleport. Feast Day lets you Feeding Frenzy for free, and Grizzlegore gives your heroes and monsters exploding hits, pile in and fight after being slain, and your general always strikes first. Your army command ability is Feeding Frenzy, allowing a unit wholly within 12 of a hero to pile in and attack a second time. Your summoning mechanic is Mustering, and your heroes can summon courtiers, knights, and or serfs depending on their rank. They're all once per game per hero and cost a command point. Never mind, you can summon without command points when near the Charnel Throne, your terrain feature. Standout units include the Abhorrent Archregent, an undercosted summoning factory with a powerful D3 extra attacks for every weapon on target unit spell, Abhorrent Ghoul King on Royal Terrorgeist with summoning, a 5-up shrug spell, and is a good fight for a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon in combat, except if Grizzlegore, then they just fight first and win. Traps include not taking the good things. Honestly, everything is basically playable, and if not, you have plenty of strong buffs to hand out and extra things to summon. Hobby. Dirty ghouls with open wounds and bone trophies will be simple enough to paint for beginners, but the samey-looking serfs and spindly mounts will present a nice challenge for veterans and really make them stand out. Acquisition $3. While it might appear cheaper at first, you can summon, depending on your build, like 500 or even 1,000 extra points onto the table, and so if you're going for a full summoning sideboard, this is probably 4 stars. You have a great start collecting though. Difficulty 1 star. Summon your stuff, point and click your buffs, and it's up to your opponents to deal with it. Mistakes or bad luck are heavily softened by always strikes first, multiple pile-ins, summoning flying, and piling in even if you die. List building difficulty 2 stars. Your summoning mechanic and pairing courtiers with knights and serfs means a little more care needs to be taken in thinking about what your guys will do. While the Monster Mash lists are the most commonly talked about, they're essentially memes, and a better mix of bodies and archregents is the stronger choice. Blisterkin has great shenanigans, but it's kind of the hipster choice, and you might as well just take the free wins Grizzlegore gives you, to be honest. For 3 years, Flesh Eater Courts was tied with Beastclaw Raiders for worst Battle Tome army in the game. So this is justice, and don't feel bad. Ride your wave, man. Ride your wave. Competitiveness S tier. Most armies don't have the tools to deal with what you're doing, and even tier 1 generally just needs to dodge your matchup. Practice those mirror matches, and good luck against Skaventide. Pros. Fast, flying, summoning, strikes first. Flesh Eater is the reason everyone had to start caring about the activation wars. It doesn't matter how good your guys are in combat if they never get to attack. Many excellent combat buffs, attack even when killed, Lots of summoning, good on battle plans, ethereal monster, some troop regen, ward saves. Cons. Quote-unquote weak to shooting, no bonuses to cast, and summoning is board edge only. Grand Alliance Chaos. Khorne. It's Deathclock the army. Huge muscle-bound dudes with maximum rip and tear weapons led by Gwar cosplay heroes that use spinal cords as ponytails and drink blood out of their victims' skulls. Massive winged bloodthirster demons with flaming whips and cruel axes bellow commands to hordes of greatsworder demons and brass blood crusher mounted cavalry. Slaughter priests beg Khorne for head explodey power or scorpion get over here ability, which Khorne either grants or kills them for asking at his leisure. Khorne is the chaos god of war and bloodshed. Worshipping him is simple, and the rewards are instant and powerful. Blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne. Slay your enemies and see them flee before you, or die trying. Either way, it serves his purposes. On the table, your battle trait is Blood Tithe. Keep track of every unit slain during the game, and you can spend those points on sweet bonuses like Hero Phase Movement, Auto Counter Spells, Hero Phase Pile-In and Attack, Board-Wide Fight After Slain, and Daemon Summoning. Yes, you count both yours and your opponent's dead. After all, Khorne cares not from whence the blood flows. However, your summoning must end up wholly within a hero or your Skull Altar terrain piece, and once you spend any amount of points, they are immediately set back to 0, wasting any leftover ones, which is such a shame, GW. Anyway. The Skull Altar also lets priests reroll prayers near it, which is a big deal, because they tend to work only on 4-ups. Also, you have Judgments of Khorne, which act like endless spells that have specific but punishing effects, and the models really look quite nice. Reapers of Vengeance is the anti-magic slaughter host that gives you double pile-in command ability and makes your general all but immune to spells. Bloodlords makes your daemon general a complete house with plus 4-inch movement and always strikes first. Goretide makes your mortal troops fast and your general ethereal. And Skullfiend can be okay, I guess, if you seriously love Korgoraths. Standout units include the mighty Slaughter Priest. These form the backbone of your power, with their excellent prayers both on War Scroll and Book, including D6 Mortal Wounds Blood Boil, one of the few +1 armor save abilities in the game, and Scorpion Get Over Here on enemy units. Bloodsecrator, a mobile totem that gives AoE +1 bonus attack to those wholly within 16 of him, and Wrathmongers, Bath Salts Berserkers that inspire your dudes with +1 bonus attack if wholly within 8. If playing mortals, Bloodstoker makes them fast. Korgus Kull with his hilarious activate from and pile in 8 inches ability, allowing him to RKO from out of nowhere into combats he's not even remotely close to. Mighty Skullcrushers are a fine mobile anvil. Blood Warriors are a fine bread and butter battle line unit with good armor and pile in when slain. Bloodthirsters can be good in their battalion. The best one is arguably Insensate Rage due to his AoE critical hits. Traps include most of the other heroes. There are so many slow melee assassins here that it's sad. Bloodletters are traps without every single attack buff on them at all times. Blood Crushers, Blood Throne Skull Cannons, and Scarbrand. An 8-inch move melee assassin monster without flying. Yikes. Though it sure is fun if he gets into combat with something that isn't chaff. Hobby. Lots of dirty metals will be good for new painters, although reds are tricky to get right, especially as you brighten them up for highlights, as just adding white will make it pink. Turn the dial orange as you go up instead. Or avoid reds because you want to splatter blood on everything in the end and you should probably stand out. Acquisition $1. Although you'll need a lot of guys, you aren't necessarily horde tier exactly, and you have a cornucopia of start collectings over 4, as well as many older battle and story boxes, nearly as much as Stormcast, and more than Night Hunt. Lots of secondhand sales can be found as well, though some particular models can be hard to come by, like Korgoraths. Difficulty 5 stars. Make no mistake, you'd think this would be the most mindless army to play. Big melee run up and smash Timmy army that appeals to casuals. Wrong. If you play chess, consider Khorne. You are locked in a straitjacket of wholly within and overlapping Venn diagram buff zones of murder, all with restrictively short range. Blood Tithe management is filled with hard choices and almost unavoidable FOMO, coupled with the fact that your troops are super weak without buffs, and there's an annoying divide between mortals and daemons for some reason, creating keyword bingo. And prayers are unreliable. If running the Tyrants of Blood Battalion, the difficulty becomes 3 stars. List building difficulty 4 stars. Keyword bingo and being pulled between MSU for Blood Tithe or big units for buffs, and a mandatory deployment consideration with all your buff positioning. Competitiveness Tier 2. Melee grinders with some tricks, but hard to play, and many armies do what Khorne does, only better. Pros. Good melee damage with buffs, strong prayers when they work. Good anti-magic, limited summoning, can have a strikes first monster, though at the cost of an artifact, so no ethereal. Can be fast sometimes, pile in when slain. Cons. Tedious to play Iron Maiden of positioning, no Blood Tithe rollover minutes, bad ranged, limited summoning, unreliable prayers, low rend. Nurgle. Plague-ridden, diseased, and festering, the armies of Nurgle spread terrible miasmas of rotting, fuming death across the mortal realms in the name of their benevolent god. They consider their choking plagues to be a gift from Grandfather Nurgle, and the gurgling cries of their victims are interpreted as thankful praise. The massive, corpulent, great unclean ones ring their bells and magically infuse their disgustingly resilient troops with fast movement and extra kill power. Tentacle-enhanced Captain Gutrot D. Spume sails a pirate ship of Blight Kings on the slime wave caused by a mind-controlled kraken. AoS is sweet. On the table, your battle trait is the Wheel of Corruption, a cycle of buffs and debuffs that start in a random place and then move clockwise as the turns proceed, though you do have a few ways to bend it to your will. The bonuses are often pretty good, like +2 movement army-wide, heal D3 to each unit, reroll 6s to wound for enemies, sorry Khorne, and more. You also have contagion points, a pretty nice summoning system. Your terrain feature is a putrid Gnarlmaw, which damages nearby enemies, gives you contagion, and lets your guys run and charge. Plus, you can summon more. Your daemon units have Disgustingly Resilient, a 5-up ward. Standout units include the Great Unclean One, sometimes in multiples. This dude is a big boy buff wagon, double caster, giving +3 move to nearby units and a bonus attacks command ability. Bell and Casting Dagger always, unless you're in a Thricefold Befoulment, then 1 combat loadout is okay, and Rodicus becomes a good addition, with his great spell. Plague Bearers are your tar pit anvil and work great in massive regiments. Plague Drones make for good flying cavalry that absorb buffs well, and are superior to Pluscoil Blightlords. Gutrot Spume can ambush putrid Blight Kings, which can be a good option, as ogres wish they were as thick as Blight Kings. Though if you expect hit penalties, they become pillow-fisted, at least until their exploding hits get updated to natural 6s, here's hoping. Traps include the Glotkin, who is pricey and too fragile with no ward save, because he's not technically a demon, even though he's a mountain of demonic flesh the size of a garage. Horticulus Slimix, Beasts of Nurgle, Sloppity Bilepiper, Blowab Rotspawned, Orgoth's Daemon Spew, Morbidex Twiceborn, Epidemius, Spoilpox Scrivener, and Nurglings. What a shame all these great models have weak war scrolls and poor costs. If I were considering Nurgle, I would really look forward to the GHB 19. Hobby. One of the best armies for all, if you're into this sort of thing. Gross Flesh is a messy green wash and some details away from tabletop for new painters. And exacting care can be taken for veterans to make some truly disgusting and colorful poxes. Besides Plague Bearers, your sculpts are pretty outstanding as well, especially the Great Unclean One, who is just a thing of beauty, despite very much not being a thing of beauty. Acquisition $2. Your prices are mostly not bad, and start collecting Daemons of Nurgle is decent, although the other two aren't so great. This becomes 3 stars if you're getting a full summoning board or going in on Blight Kings. Difficulty 3 stars. While your great defense and point-and-click charges make things easier, managing the intricacies of your hero phase, wheel prediction and planning, and slowness when not near the Death Star brings you back up to average. List building difficulty 2 stars. Avoiding the seemingly endless traps leaves you with about 3 options for lists, and they mostly build themselves. Competitiveness High Tier 2. Thricefold Befoulment is probably the most competitive build, and it's not uncommon to see a Nurgle list sneak into the top few here and there, though many don't fare so well, and have some hard counters if their spells get shut down. Jack of all trades, master of none. Pros. Excellent durability, can be fast, good buffs, good spells, good summoning, can ambush if using Spoom, good flying cavalry if on drones, good debuffs. Cons. Low rend, Death Star formation, counter spells hurt, low-ish model count, slow when things aren't going well, low damage when buffs don't line up. Tzeentch. The Changer of Ways, the Master of Fortune, the Great Conspirator, and the Architect of Fate. These are just some of the names of Tzeentch. His followers, daemon and mortal alike, swarm over the realms in scintillating glory, searing the land with coruscating flames of change. Zangor tribes raid ancient places of knowledge, while mortal cultists work in secret to advance their god's unknowable goals. Tzeentch's plans are manifold, and he revels in watching each unravel. On the table, your battle trait is Masters of Destiny. Before the game begins, you roll 9 dice and keep them out. Before you make a roll amongst a table like casting, unbinding, hit, save, battle shock, etc., you may decide to, instead of roll, take one of your fate dice and just say the dice rolls that number. Sometimes a tough decision because you only have 9 of these, just kidding, you have a spell to add 1 every turn. And you can make outlandishly unlikely events virtually a guarantee. You also accrue summoning points by either you or your opponent successfully casting a spell and having it not unbound. Side note for the rules lawyers out there, unlike in Magic, in AoS you don't choose targets until after a spell successfully resolves and after unbinds. Then if you don't want to target something, that's fine, but it still counts as cast, just saying. As you might expect, your spells and spell lores are off the chain. Standout units include Zangor Enlightened on discs, which are strong flying cavalry with absurd movement, that many are spamming in similar ways to Idoneth Deepkin's eels, though big clouds of Zangor can be nice. Zangor Shaman is an excellent caster hero that shepherds your Enlightened around the battlefield, and his spell can add models to nearby Enlightened units. Also, Battleshock results of a 1 auto pass and add models to daemon units as well. However, it's unlikely. It only works on a 1. Never mind fate dice. Auto 1 passed, d6 added, auto 6 for 280 points added to the unit. Outskilled. Blue Scribes are a good caster buff totem, and Gaunt Summoner is a cool wizard with a Hordebreaker spell. Playing many endless spells that can buff casting or are just great, like Balewind Vortex, Chronomatic Cogs on the extra spell setting, and Geminids are common. Curseling has a neat combo with enhanced Unbind Rage command trait to steal enemy spells, but it's probably too cute. Traps include Lord of Change and Kairos, as they're just way expensive for what they do. Ogroid Thaumaturge and the non-bow triple nerfed Skyfires. Consider some Tzeentch marked Slaves to Darkness for chaff. Hobby. Lots of little details on most of your guys, lots of skin and weird faces, a challenge to rise to surely. Also, horrors of Tzeentch of the various colors are very hard to make not look dumb. Acquisition $3. Your start collecting is bad, but your boxes aren't terribly expensive, though you will need to get a summoning board, and since the daemon units are used in 40k, there are good opportunities for secondhand. Difficulty 3 stars. Your crazy flying movement, summoning, and ability to cheat at dice do a lot to ease the difficulty of playing the army. However, everything you have is fragile, and your non-heroes are expensive, so you're more elite than you'd like to be. List building difficulty 4 stars. Avoid the traps, but then you need to come up with a clockwork game plan, and still fit endless spells in there. Branching out to God-marked Slaves to Darkness and how much chaff to run makes this harder. Competitiveness Tier 2. Enlightened do much to carry you here, and Fate Dice can make a turn 5 12-inch charge or lose the game situation into auto success. And your Spell Factory does lots of mortal wounds and can start regularly summoning when it gets going. That being said, your spell engine is a house of cards led by fragile casters. Pros. Super fast and flying. Big damage spells, regen above cap, limited summoning, can fix dice, lots of mortal wounds, good rend. Cons. Fragile heroes, fragile units, poor summoning table, elite. Slaanesh. Mortals indulge their desires and obsessions beyond all sense of decency and glory in forbidden excess. And while such horrors persist, so too will the followers of Slaanesh. Where once the Dark Prince compelled her subjects to greater depths of depravity, his greater daemons now rule in her stead. Although chained up by the treacherous elven gods Teclis, Tyrian, and Malarian, in the dim greyness betwixt the realms of light and shadow, Morathi's greed and stupidity has given him an out, and she intends to take it. He being the Chaos God most likely to enjoy such binding notwithstanding, the mortal realms will forever be changed once she escapes. On the table, your battle traits are many and powerful. Let's start with Depravity, your summoning system. Whenever a Slaanesh hero deals or is dealt damage, for each point of damage they take that doesn't kill them or their target, you get a Depravity point. Your summoning table, unlike Tzeentch, is very generous and features heroes, so yes, your heroes generate points that you can use to summon heroes that generate points. Johnny likes. You also have Locus of Diversion, which is your entrant into the activation wars. At the end of each charge phase, your heroes can cause an enemy unit within 6 to fight last in combat on a 4-up, or a 2-up if the hero is a greater daemon. Spike likes. Finally, you have Euphoric Killers, which makes your army's natural hit rolls of 6 produce 2 hits instead of 1. 3 hits if the unit has 20 or more models. Timmy likes. Your terrain piece is the Fane of Slaanesh, which gives you bonus depravity if you summon near it, and lets a nearby hero make a tempting choice of paying life or artifact power for combat bonuses. Then you have 3 hosts, the Invaders, Pretenders, and Godseekers, all with different plans and views about Slaanesh's imprisonment, and come with different powers, traits, and artifacts. Standout units include Daemonettes, a solid rending battle line unit with exploding hits and run and charge. They're like fair witch elves, which means they're actually still great, if fragile. Other standout units include the Contorted Epitome, Keeper of Secrets in multiples, and the Herald on Exalted Chariot. Traps include chariots that don't have heroes on top, the Mask, Shalaxia Hellbane, and Fiends. Poor Fiends. They weren't worth it at 180, they sure aren't worth it at 210. Hobby. Assembling chariots is pain, and there's lots of skin, faces, and little details all throughout, though not as much as, say, Idoneth. But it will be a blast to convert and paint these. What a success story from the previous model line. They look great. Acquisition $3. You have such a great start collecting, and your troops are well costed, though your heroes are pricey, and you'll need a lot of summoning space. Difficulty 3 stars. I mean, it's a glass cannon army through and through. You have great summoning, really fast, a bunch of cool tricks and abilities, activation war stuff, but at the end of the day, if your people get attacked, they explode. List building difficulty 3 stars. Choosing which of the 3 hosts to run is probably your main concern here, and after that, you'll lean hero heavy for depravity and you're probably good. Competitiveness Tier 2. Fast glass cannon army with prodigious summoning that punishes elite armies and plays the activation game. Strong but prone to exploding. A good choice. Pros. Fast, lots of rend, maybe the best summoning in the game, good spells, heroes often make the opponent strike last, good power projection. Cons. Armor is made of tissue paper, no ranged. Opponent army filled with only 1 wound guys can depravity starve you. Beasts of Chaos. The earth trembles as the beast herds approach. Plants wither and rot. Animals are filled with an instinctual fear and the air grows thick with the taint of raw chaos energy. Then the bloodthirsty braying begins. The beasts of chaos emerge from woodland knots and rocky outcrops, bellowing their savage battle cries as they fall upon their prey. They are the true children of chaos, and through them anarchy and ruin are spread across the lands of the civilized races. On the table, your battle traits are Brayherd Ambush, where you can set up half of your Brayherd models in ambush, but they must come out on turn 1. You have Primordial Call, a sacrificial summoning system where you throw your lesser troops into the fire of your Herdstone to get points to summon units from ambush later in the game. Herdstone is your terrain piece, which emits an aura of battle shock immunity for you, and -1 to save rolls for enemies within 6 inches. This aura grows 6 inches per turn to cap out a 30-inch radius on turn 5. You also may choose a Great Fray or go without. All Herd is bad, Darkwalkers has a teleport, but a real bad command trait and artifact, and Gavespawn has Wind Fury totems with stacking bonus attacks, command ability from Chaos Spawn that appear when a hero dies, but you can also run them as units if you want more. Standout units include Great Bray Shaman, often taken in 2s. They're a fine little caster with a -1 save penalty spell and Scorpion Get Over Here spell. Zangor Shaman with Retinue of Zangor Enlightened on discs make a fine combo here, as Beasts of Chaos share some of these units with Tzeentch. Bestigors are well named, and serve as your fast hammer units for a decent price. Wildfire Taurus Endless Spell lets you participate in the activation wars, although your wizards don't get bonuses to cast. When it crashes into enemy units, however, they take mortal wounds and fight last. But what if you need to take priority and it hits you instead? You're probably running 60 Bestigor in units of 10, and they were dead when charged anyway, so who cares, just summon more. Dragon Ogre Shoggoth is a decent fast melee chopper with a 5 damage axe if in Gave spawn, and his Hailstorm spell is brutal. Target unit halves move, runs, and charges. Oof. Ungor Raiders make neat little MSU chaff protection with their start of the game movement even if it's not your turn, allowing them to generally waste the enemy's first alpha. Traps, you got a lot of traps. Centaurs, Dragon Ogres, Tuskor Chariot, Beast Lord, Razorgore, Warhound, and literally every monster, yes, sadly including the awesome looking but terrible Cygor and Gorgon. GHB 19 can't come soon enough. Hobby. Seeing these on the website doesn't do them justice. In person, they're great. A good army for new painters, with dirty skin that takes washes well, and lots of armor, chain, leather, and skull bits for details. Advanced hobbyists have endless conversion opportunities here. Though with some of the sculpts, namely the Shoggoth, the model is so old and derpy that building your own is probably a necessity. Acquisition $3. For a horde army, you might actually be the cheapest. Your start collecting essentially gives you a free behemoth. You don't need a particularly large summoning board either, as the mechanic generally obliges you to just keep ambushing in 10-man units to harry points, die, come back, and steal objectives. List building difficulty 4 stars. The sheer choices here can leave you with analysis paralysis. You have 3 battalions that can be used in Khorne, Slaanesh, or Tzeentch armies with their allegiance abilities. And so you could be running 90% Beasts of Chaos models in some other army with their allegiance abilities. You also have the Great Phrase, you can lean on different strategies in your own force, and more. Super interesting if list building is the kind of thing you like. Competitiveness Tier 2. Enlightened heavy lists can hang with the big boys if your punishing spells resolve, but with no bonuses to cast, it's in the hands of fate. Pros. Fast, waves of damaging disposable hammers, good flying cavalry, ambush, brutal spells, limited summoning, activation war endless stealth, though unreliable, immune to alpha strikes that don't fly, teleport if darkwalkers, wind fury bonus attacks if Gave spawn. Cons. No monsters, no range, no bonuses to cast or unbind, decent armor but still fragile. No mortal wounds unless memeing with cockatrices. Wait, is it good though? Scaventide. Red eyes and yellow fangs glint in the gloom. These are the nefarious Skaven of the 5 great clans. Each great clan in turn comprises millions of sub-clans, each with anarchic, backstabbing, and militarized societies within. They chew through realm space with gnaw holes, a labyrinthian webwork of unknowable tunnels and networks that weave into and out of space and reality. When broken open or roused to war, the teeming millions swarm out in an overwhelming mass. Scryers' factory burrows of unstable alchemy and lightning-coiled leech pipes, Pestilence's multifarious zealots and the churches of contagion, Verminus's inexhaustible and chaotic regiments of the Blight City, Molder's blasphemous dark surgery from the Hell Pits, and Eshen's mystery of poisoned shadows. These untold billions raise their claws in worship of the 5th Chaos God, the paranoidal, splintered abomination that is the Great Horned Rat. Though he has ascended, he is not satisfied. On the table, your battle traits are Lead from the Back, which makes Look Out, Sir apply to melee as well. Scurry Away, which lets Scaventide heroes retreat instead of pile in an attack when activated in combat. Overwhelming Mass, which adds +1 to hit if a unit has at least 20 models, and a +1 to wound if they have at least 30 models. You also get 3 gnaw holes to place as terrain, which act as arcane for you, stack with arcane, and let you teleport between them during the game. Then you choose a clan, and the Scaventide book, much like Legions of Nagash, can be considered a mini Grand Alliance with its structure and the sheer span of war scrolls. Each clan has its own ability, battle line, command traits, artifacts, unit choices, spell lores, and prayers. Master Clan can mix and match to some degree. This battle tome is so massive and complicated that I'll just list some general standout units without much care for what clan has what. Verminlord Warpseer has rerollable saves, can have 2 stacking ward saves on top of that, and projects Battle Shock immunity to a huge area. Also casts 2 spells. Incredible utility and power for what he costs. The other Verminlords are great as well. Greyseer gets good spell choices, Clawlord buffs clan rats, Engineers make Warp Lightning Cannons overcharge for double-digit mortal wounds, Plague Monks are even better than they used to be, Scryer Acolytes are low-key hot, Skitterleap is a great teleport, Warp Lightning Vortex is the best endless spell in the game, Clan Rats are some of the best battle line in the game, don't underestimate their power. Traps include not taking at least most of the standout units you're able to. After that, you could fill the rest of the list with random cool-looking junk and you'll be fine. Hobby. Dirty Rats are easy enough for beginners, but you will need to paint a lot of them. Verminlords are glorious demonic rodentia, and very rewarding to paint. Insane Scryer War Machines are a special treat, be they mechanically enhanced rat ogres that got the Bane treatment in Storm Fiends, or Electro Doom Wheels. Lots of character here. Acquisition $5, not recommended at all for new players, and this isn't just cost, though it is high, but finding many of these models can be very difficult, and who knows what GHB 19 will do. Probably wait until that book comes out. Difficulty 3 stars, standard difficulty for an AoS army. List building difficulty 5 stars. Figuring out how armies are supposed to go together can be pretty tricky for a new player with this book, never mind the intricacies of faction keyword bingo and combos. Competitiveness S tier. Quite simply, you have everything an army needs to succeed, and an answer for pretty much whatever an opponent is trying to do. The game is yours to lose. Pros. Great hordes, great spells, Gnawhole teleports, Skitterleap teleport, Battle Shock immunity, best ranged in the game, invulnerable monster, arguably best combat buff in the game in more warp power, and it works on range too. Good damage, heroes that can flee combat, retreat and charge battle line, a good answer to the activation wars by just shooting the thing off the table, and Warp Lightning Vortex. Cons. No flying combat monster, and GHB 19 is a concern. Legion of Asgore. Twisted Duarden who sell their souls in service of Hashut, the Legion of Asgore are infamous for the terror they spread across Akshi. Entrenched within a dread fortress built into the Ash Cloud Mountains, they harbor utter contempt for all other races. Man or beast, grot or monster, all fall before them, enslaved to fuel the Legion's malevolent industry and sacrificial pyres. Masters of murderous war machines and unyielding iron, the realms tremble when the legions of Asgore march forth. The Duarden have embraced chaos spellcasting, though at a price. Every spell they cast has a chance to further their eventual transformation into a stone statue, to be placed in the halls of their fortress as memorial decoration. On the table, your battle trait is Black Stone Armor, allowing each of your units to negate the first wound they take in each shooting and each combat phase. Seems minor, but these really do add up. Standout units include Daemon Smiths, who have a strong debuff spell with 36-inch range, giving the unit -1 to hit, and it can't run. Fireglaves make solid mid-range shooters with rend and a mortal wound proc. Kadai Fireborn are a random but strong choice, likely to be underestimated by opponents. Magma Cannons blast for long-range mortal wounds, but are optional. You are a Beta Strike army through and through. The real power comes with your deep ally pool and endless spells. Choose wisely. Hobby. Beware, everything is finecast, but it couldn't be simpler to paint heavily armored dwarves. Fireborn offer a great opportunity for painting realistic flames, and allies let you branch out into other themes. Acquisition, it's Forge World. Look on their website for prices at your own risk. Difficulty 2 stars. You have 4-star difficulty choices to make before the game begins in planning your strategy, and deployment is always a big deal with such slow movement as well. But on the table, 2 stars. Cast your spells, hope they resolve, shoot stuff. List building difficulty 4 stars. Allies will make or break your entire list, and you really need a plan. Competitiveness tier 2. You are a counterpunch army, and many will find it hard to play against that strat, especially with your ranged and endless spells. Your extreme slowness and reliance on a few key units are the weaknesses here. Pros: good range, strong cloud of flying grinders, durable, very powerful spells, no one knows what any of your stuff does. Cons: slow, weak to strong unbinds, no movement shenanigans, and your stuff is fiddly if some key pieces don't pan out. Well, we did it. Wow, that was a long one. I hope this will help you figure out a proper start to your Age of Sigmar story. Don't forget the best way into the hobby is with friends and community, so seek them out, and current players make sure to be good ambassadors to the game. Comment below with any questions you have and I'll be sure to answer all of them. Special thanks again to my Patreon supporters in Mornfang tier and above for helping me spend extra time this month on this 20-hour writing, recording, and editing job. I'm doing it at a loss for now, but with more heroic supporters like Michael Derazinski, Karl Martin Rosenberg, Miguel, and Doom and Darkness, I hope to someday break even from the contract work I pass up to pursue these videos. I hope this version 2 of the video is even more helpful to the community than the first one, but the way GW is churning out books this year, I'm sure we'll need a version 3 soon. Maybe it'll even include an updated battle tome for my beloved Beastclaw Raiders. Also, I finished this just in time for GHB 19 to come out in a month, and potentially make all of this irrelevant. Yay. Thanks for watching.